December condemning Israeli settlements in the Palestinian West Bank. Here.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the organic wine company, ecowine.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com. And welcome to Thom Hartmann University Book Club. And today we're reading from Unequal Protection, How Corporations Became People and How You Can Fight Back. This is Chapter 11. It's titled Corporate Control of Politics, page 170. During the bruising primary election season of 2008, a right-wing group put together a 90-minute hit job on Hillary Clinton and wanted to run it on TV stations in strategic states. Federal Election Commission ruled that the advertisements for the documentary were actually campaign ads and thus fell under the restrictions on campaign spending of the McCain-Feingold Act and thus stopped them from airing. Corporate contributions to campaigns have been repeatedly banned and in various ways since 1907, when Republican President Teddy Roosevelt pushed through the Tillman Act. Citizens United, the right-wing group, sued to the Supreme Court with right-wing hitman and former Reagan Solicitor General Ted Olson, the man who argued Bush's side of Bush v. Gore, as their lead lawyer. This new case, Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission, presented the best opportunity for the Roberts Court to use its 5-vote majority to completely rewrite the face of American politics, rolling us back to the pre-1907 era of the robber barons. And if there was one man to do it, it was John Roberts. Although he was handsome with a nice smile and photogenic young children, Roberts was no friend to average working Americans. If anything, he was the most radical judicial activist appointed to the court in more than a century. He had worked most of his life in the interest of the rich and powerful and was chomping at the bit for a chance to turn more of America over to his friends. As Jeffrey Toobin wrote in The New Yorker, quote, "In every major case since he became the nation's 17th Chief Justice, Roberts has sided with the prosecution over the defendant, the state over the condemned, the executive branch over the legislative, and the corporate defendant over the individual plaintiff. Even more than Scalia, who has embodied judicial conservatism during a generation of service on the Supreme Court, Roberts has served the interests and reflected the values of the contemporary Republican Party." End of quote. And the fastest way the modern Republican Party could recover its power over the next decade was to immediately clear away all impediments to unrestrained corporate participation in electoral politics. If a corporation likes a politician, it can ensure that he is elected every time. If it becomes upset with a politician, it can carpet bomb her district and with a few $1 million worth of ads and politically destroy her. In the Citizens United case, the Roberts court listened to arguments and took briefs and even discussed it among themselves as if they were going to make a decision. But instead of deciding the case on the relatively narrow grounds on which it had originally been argued, whether a single part of a single piece of legislation, in this case McCain-Feingold, was unconstitutional, the court asked for it to be re-argued in September 2009 and asked that the breadth of the arguments be expanded to re-examine the rationales for Congress to have any power to regulate so-called free speech by corporations. In this, they were going along with a request from Theodore B. Olson, who argued Bush v. Gore and would not just look at this narrow case, but go back nearly 20 years to re-examine and perhaps overturn their own ruling in the Austin v. Michigan Chamber of Commerce case, where the court held that it was constitutional for Congress to pass limits on corporate political activities, as well as its decision in 2003 to uphold McCain-Feingold as constitutional. The setup for this 2010 decision came in June of 2007 in the Federal Election Commission versus Wisconsin Right to Life case, in which the Robert courts ruled that the FCC could not prevent Wisconsin Right to Life from running ads just because it was a corporation. The idea of Congress passing laws that limited corporate free speech was clearly horrifying to both Roberts and Scalia. Scalia went after the 1990 Austin v. Michigan Chamber of Commerce case, in which the then Rehnquist court had ruled that the Michigan Chamber of Commerce was limited in its free speech in a political campaign because it was a corporation. Scalia complained this Austin was the only pre-McConnell case that this court had ever permitted the government to restrict political speech based on the corporate identity of the speaker. Austin upheld state restrictions on corporate independent expenditures, and God forbid the statute had been modeled after the federal statute the BCRA 203 amended. End of quote. The Austin case, Scalia concluded, with four others nodding, was a significant departure from ancient First Amendment principles. In my view, it was wrongly decided. Scalia was quoted at length from opinions in the Grosjean v. American Press 1936 case. In Scalia's words, quote, holding that corporations are guaranteed the freedom of speech and of press, safeguarded by the due process of law clause of the 14th Amendment. He also quoted the 1986 Pacific Gas and Electric Company versus Public Utility Commission of California case. The identity of the speaker is not decisive in determining whether speech is protected. Corporations and other associations, like individuals, contribute to the discussion, debate, and the dissemination of information and ideas that the First Amendment seeks to foster. The bottom line for Scalia was, quote, the principle that such advocacy is at the heart of the First Amendment's protection and is indispensable to decision-making in a democracy is no less true because the speech comes from a corporation rather than an individual. The book, Unequal Protection, How Corporations Became People and How You Can Fight Back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom. It is Monday, January 16th. We are 4 days away from the inauguration of Donald to be our next president, a date that I don't think many of us are looking forward to, but that we all need to recognize is real, is happening, just like the fact that the Republicans are coming to destroy our Medicare, coming to destroy our Medicaid, our Social Security, our health care. That is happening, and we need to recognize that, and also we need to resist and fight back as hard as we can. And I want to talk about what happened yesterday with the over 70 events around the country, 500 community meetings, hundreds of thousands of Americans standing up and saying, hands off our health care. And I want to talk about some things that are coming up. First, though, I want to talk with a great friend of mine who I've had the pleasure of working with for years, and an incredibly important truth teller whose story and information and advocacy and activism is going to be even more important than ever right now, as Donald and his minions in the Capitol come for our health care. Joining me on the line is Wendell Potter. Wendell, thank you so much for joining us on Skype, is Wendell Potter. Wendell, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Alex. Glad to be a part of the show. Good to talk to you too, especially.
So, Wendell, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and why I introduced you, as your story and the information you bring to this is so important now. Wendell and I met each other when we were pushing for a better version of Obamacare than what we actually ended up with. But in that fight, I learned your story, Wendell. Can you just share a little bit of that so that everybody knows?
Well, sure. Thanks, Alex. As you know, I spent 20 years working inside the health insurance industry at senior levels. I was working at Cigna Corporation, one of the biggest for-profit insurers, when I decided to quit after a crisis of conscience in 2008. And that crisis of conscience came as a result of me coming to realize that what I was doing for a living was making it possible for people, or making it necessary for people, to get care in barns and animal stalls. And I'll explain that. I went back home to Tennessee to visit folks back in a few months before I left my job, and I picked up the newspaper, saw something about a healthcare fair, or expedition as they called it, a few miles from where I grew up. I went there out of curiosity, and I saw thousands of people at this county fairgrounds lined up, standing in the rain. And I saw that these long lines that stretched out of view, they were leading into barns and animal stalls at that county fairground. That was an epiphany for me. And soon after that, I made a decision, a pledge that day, that I'd find some other way to earn a living. And I did, or at least I left my job without a plan, without another job lined up. And I decided to try to help advocates to push for healthcare reform and to help members of Congress understand how insurance companies really work. So I wound up testifying before Congress many, many times during the healthcare reform debate.
So, Wendell, let's go through a little bit of what we're hearing from Donald and from folks on the Hill, and they're not even similar. So we have to actually treat them separately. And you know, the biggest question for policy advocates and people who pay attention is who is actually in charge of the agenda right now. And, you know, like, just as an example, Donald keeps saying that, you know, he's not going to do anything with Medicare. And his people have consistently actually said, Sean Spicer said it, Reince said it. His you know, direct minions said they're not going to do anything with Medicare and Medicaid. But you go to the Hill, and Medicare and Medicaid are right in the middle of everything, especially Medicaid. I mean, full destruction of Medicaid. Paul Ryan, you know, the evil Eddie Munster looking guy, goes on CNN and he details, you know, bullet point by bullet point, his plan to destroy Medicare. So I want to kind of go through the two different ones separately, because they're obviously not talking about the same thing. But even in his, you know, like, Trump is not bound by facts or reality or anything, right? He just says things, and then he maybe tweets out things and goes with it. But even in his, even with unbounded by fact, if you actually know how healthcare works, his promises don't make any more sense than anything else, right? I mean, like, he's saying what he's saying he's going to do is not possible. Can you kind of explain a little bit about why what Donald Trump is saying is not possible?
Yeah, exactly. And it's clear that he doesn't have any knowledge at all, any understanding of how healthcare is delivered and financed in this country. On the Hill, they do. And as you said, the Republicans are, for many years, have been trying to dismantle Medicare and Medicaid and to privatize the whole healthcare system as much as they can. What Trump is saying, in fact, he told the Washington Post in an interview over the weekend that he is going to ensure that everybody has, in his words, beautiful coverage, where we'll all be beautifully covered. Which is, you know, sheer nonsense from what he's talking about. Although he has said, as you may remember, back in 2015 during one of the GOP primary debates, he expressed some admiration for the healthcare systems in Canada and Scotland, which are single-payer systems. Right. and said that we should have something like theirs. But then he obviously has backed off from that.
But if that would be the only way, actually. So like what he's saying of, oh, I'm going to give everyone beautiful coverage and everyone will pay less money and everyone's going to be covered and there's not going to be pre-existing conditions or lifetime limits or a mandate to buy health insurance or right. And he lists all these things and you're like, that's literally all impossible. There's only one thing that could do that, which is expanded Medicare to cover everyone. But there's no way that his minions on the Hill are going to do that. In fact, they're going the exact opposite direction.
Yeah, it's dissonance. There's no doubt about it. And you're exactly right. The folks on the Hill, the Republicans on the Hill, would never consider expanding Medicare for all, which makes a lot of sense, of course, but it doesn't fit into their worldview of the so-called free market. And they don't really understand that either. At least if they do understand it, they're very callous, because there is no way, as you noted, in the world that you can get everybody covered with quality, with decent coverage, and that people can have access to the care that they need without doing exactly that. The insurance companies, the private insurance companies, would do that only on one if only one thing happened, and that is to give them the keys to the Treasury. If they did that, if they could get all the money that they wanted to cover everybody, then sure, they'd do it.
No, they wouldn't. I would say they still wouldn't, Wendell. They would still actually, they'd take, or let me put it this way. The insurance companies said, oh, well, you should let us just have these mergers after mergers. There used to be dozens of them. And they're like, oh, no, but if you let us just merge and merge and merge and have these massive businesses, we'll cover more people and we'll deliver savings to the people. So then there's 5, and yet, nope, no savings to the people, even under the slightly heightened regulatory framework of Obamacare. They still figured out ways to rip people off, and they're continuing to consolidate, right? So we go from the big 5 and now we're going to look at the big 3. I think I think the point is we're going to get to single payer. It's just whether is it going to be single payer corporate delivered health care, which means no one's going to get health care. If you're sick, you're on your own, and a handful of plutocrats are going to get extra golden yachts. Or is it going to be an improved and expanded Medicare for everybody, where we actually push out the intermediaries, which is a really unfair, that's not true. Intermediaries, they don't deliver anything. They just extract things of the insurance company and especially of the pharmaceutical industry.
You're right. And this talk about what the folks on the Hill and even Trump is saying, that we need to have more competition in the insurance industry. Well, first of all, that's not going to happen. Insurers talk a good game. They talk about choice and competition, which is one of the buzz terms that they've used forever, and while at the same time doing exactly as you described, consolidate to the point that we just now have a very few big, gigantic health insurance corporations, most of which are now publicly traded, and they answer to Wall Street, not to their enrollees.
They have one master, and it's Wall Street.
That's exactly right. There is no way, you're right there too, that they would care anything about making sure that people get the care that they need. In fact, the way they make money is to avoid paying claims, to avoid having people get the care that they need. They always, when they price their premiums, they also, this is an example of just a reason why they can't control healthcare costs. They can't, but they all estimate what they think the rise in healthcare costs are going to be during the next year. That's how they figure out their premiums. So it's all about the money. They always factor in how much they can do, how much profit they think they can make to reward their shareholders.
So Wendell, we're gonna just have a longer segment here because I love speaking with you about this, and I think it's important that people understand this right now, especially. Let's go to, so we did a little bit of what Trump's talking about, which is just, it's basically fantasy, right? Like that's where Donald is.
It's magical.
But where the Hill is where the Republicans on the Hill are, where they've been forever, right? Like you don't need to guess what's coming because we've seen it. They literally tried 60 times. They've gone through the budget reconciliation process twice They sent 2 budget reconciliations up to Obama, who vetoed them, right? So we know what's coming. And let's go through what the plan actually is. It's to throw 23 million at least people off of their health care coverage, around 30 million people losing health care coverage. It is to remove all of the restrictions that were placed on the insurance industry that were little great things that came out of the ACA, like pre-existing conditions, like lifetime spending caps. All of the ways that they actually made money by taking premiums and denying care, because that's the insurance business model for health insurance. Take your money, and then when you need the care that you're paying for, deny you that.
You're exactly right. That's a business model. And of course, that's not sustainable. You cannot bring people into coverage when you're doing that, when you're doing the best you can to exclude people who need care from getting the coverage they needed. Before the Affordable Care Act, they were able to blackball people who had been sick in the past. In other words, declare them, and this is a term that they often use, uninsurable. They would declare certain people uninsurable. And once one insurance company has turned you down, your chances of getting coverage from anybody else are slim to none. That's why, Alex,
so in our final minute here, Wendell, tell us, where can people go to find more information about you and the work that you're doing right now and the truth-telling that you're doing for the fight back?
Go to wendellpotter.com. It's where all my writings appear. My latest book is Nation on the Take, How Big Money Corrupts Our Democracy and What We Can Do About It. And my newest venture is tarbell.org, which is a new online journalism site. I encourage people to go there, because that's going to be a real truth-telling media organization when we get ramped up.
Wendell Potter, thank you so much for joining us on the Thom Hartmann Program. I say it often, for the political revolution to happen so that the government works for the people again, so that we can keep the greedy liars on Wall Street and the people who work for them in the insurance and the pharmaceutical industries in check. The political revolution needs to happen, but to get there, we need a media revolution, and tarbell.org is part of that media revolution. Wendell Potter, an incredibly important truth teller. You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom, and we will be right back after this.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be taking your calls on the Thom Hartmann Program right after this.
I have a question for you. Donald Trump, I guess, is getting a lot of contributions to his campaign.
Millions of dollars.
Yes. When November comes, if he were to lose, what would happen with that money? Because I think he's in it for the money.
I think he is too. With regard to money that has been given to his political campaign for president, I think that there's some pretty stringent limitations on how that can be used. Money that's being given to his various super PACs, though, is, basically you can recycle that money back into your own pocket. As Stephen Colbert demonstrated years ago on TV when super PACs became the thing, after Citizens United, I think it was in 2011, the year after that decision, maybe 2012. And so, I'm not really sure. The one thing that I do believe, and here, I'm wandering into conspiracy theory territory or just, observing the landscape. Donald Trump is hooked up in a very big way with Roger Ailes. In fact, he was basically using Roger Ailes' defense against his accusation of sexual misbehavior with employees at Fox News as part of his defense, right? Oh, it's just locker room talk, that kind of stuff. Roger Ailes is the disgraced former leader and creator of Fox News. Before that, he tried to create GOP TV when he worked inside the Nixon White House. And my guess and it'll be real interesting to see if I'm right or wrong on this. But my guess is that after the election, if Donald Trump loses, that he and Roger Ailes are going to launch a media company that will take on Fox News. And my guess is they may even do it by buying the failing WorldNet Daily or even the failing Blaze. Right now, Glenn Beck's whole empire is on the verge of collapse if the media reports I've read are to be believed, that he's down to 6 employees, et cetera, et cetera. And so, if Ailes and Trump went in and bought up the Blaze and bought up Glenn Beck's empire, or they bought up WorldNet Daily, or one of the other right-wing ones that have actually established satellite time on the various TV satellites and have a large footprint on the internet and a large subscriber base, then they might be able to give Fox News a run for their money for the right-wing vote, for the right-wing hardcore crazy vote. And so if there's money left over, to bring this back to your question, George, if there's money left over in the super PACs and maybe the campaign, I'm not a campaign lawyer, so I don't know the details of this, but it's not inconceivable that money could end up helping fund the launch of a new television network or something like that. So am I making sense, George? What do you think?
You're making a lot of sense to me, Tom. I agree with everything you just said.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks a lot, George, for the call. We'll have to just wait and see how this plays out because, Trump is holding this one close to his vest, and so is Ailes. I mean, they're both going through their own. Thanks, George, for the call. They're both going through kind of a, shall we say, a difficult time. But Donald Trump is going to figure out a way to come out of this looking like he has won something, and frankly to make money with it, because that's his metric of success. So and the media, I think, is ripe for the picking, given all the damage that's been done to the media by Reagan and the Telecommunications Act. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom, and just had a great discussion with Wendell Potter of tarbell.org. Wendell has a couple fantastic books that I think everyone should read. Wendell's book on the insurance industry is fantastic. I wish that it wasn't important. And sorry, Wendell, but I wish that we were at a situation where his book wasn't important. But unfortunately, his book should be a bestseller right now, even though it was written years ago, because we're about to get right back into where we were before we slightly moved our healthcare system in the right direction, basically just by covering millions more people. We didn't do much more. There were a few regulations that were great, and I'm not going to. I worked to push for Obamacare. I was focused more on the public option because I thought that would be a better step towards where we have to go, which is an improved, expanded Medicare that covers everybody, traditional Medicare. But, I think I learned a really important lesson, and I hope that everyone else did as well. There was a strategy behind going for Obamacare. There was a strategy for going towards Obamacare, which is at its base just a Republican idea. The strategy was that if we asked for too much, if we asked for what we actually wanted, the Republicans were going to fight it tooth and nail and repeal it when they got power again. The lesson here is we have to fight for what's right and what we want, Medicare for everybody, because the Republicans are going to fight everything tooth and nail. You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, taking your calls after this break.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We're going to be taking your calls after this break, so stick with us.
Welcome to the Thom Hartmann University
If
Book
you are
Club.
listening
Our
to
book
me
today
on
is
a commercial
Walking.
radio station right now, please start listening carefully to the commercials. And, you know, say you hear a commercial for a local furniture company and you have no intention of buying furniture because you don't need it or you can't afford it, but you heard the ad. Call up that furniture company and say, you know, I don't have the money right now to buy new furniture, but I promise you that I'm going to tell my friends about you, that you support, you know, fill in the blank station, you know, KTNF, WCTP, you name it, right? That you support this station. And I'm going to, you know, and I want to thank you for supporting them. I got to tell you, I mean, I meet these business owners when I go to station events, you know, station owners who have been supporting our progressive stations and business owners. And typically they're local businesses. Progressive stations tend not to get so much advertising from the big corporations and much more advertising from the small local businesses, which I think is a marvelous thing. And they will tell you if they get 1 or 2 calls a week from somebody, I'm not talking about customers, but from people saying, hey, I heard your ad on, you know, it really makes their day. It makes a big deal. It's a big difference. If you're listening on a non-commercial station, if you're listening on one of our many Pacifica affiliates, from KPFK, the biggest FM station in the United States in Los Angeles, through KBCS up in Seattle, at, you know, just a powerhouse up there, XRFM in Portland, all the way to, you know, our stations in North and South Carolina. I mean, we're all over the country, right? If you're listening to one of them and they're in a pledge drive, help them out. Toss some money their way. If you're watching Free Speech TV, participate in the pledge drive. If you're listening to Sirius XM and you hear advertisers, contact those advertisers and say, thank you for supporting Sirius XM's progressive channel. There are so, I mean, these are just really simple things that you can do with 5 minutes once every couple of weeks that actually have a big impact. And then, of course, make the commitment to tell 5 people you know about the fact that, you know, hey, there is progressive media out there and progressive websites. You know, this morning I tweeted it out. This morning I read just this great piece by George Monbiot over at The Guardian. Now, The Guardian isn't always the, you know, the most progressive publication, but they're quickly becoming my primary mainstream media news source here in the United States, because they do good stories that, you know, and they don't just follow, they don't just chase the latest shiny thing. And so I made a small donation to them this morning and I tweeted it out, and people are tweeting back at me going, oh, The Guardian, they're not that good. Well, no, I mean, you know, I also support a bunch of other progressive websites too. But, you know, and I just, you know, today I didn't tweet about that, but, you know, we can all do this. We need progressive media in the United States. We need these issues to be talked about. This is a critical time. I mean, this is a really critical time. And, you know, in a couple of weeks, well, month and a half, almost 2 months, we're going to have a new president, and something's going to start happening. And, you know, I'm not going to make predictions, and I don't want to sound like, you know, Cassandra here. Well, Cassandra's the wrong example because she turned out to be right. But, you know, I don't want to sound like Alex Jones and just lay conspiracy theories on you. But there's a big challenge coming, and we need to get ready for it. And Elizabeth Warren is right, rolling over and playing dead and saying, gee, Mr. Trump, what would you like me to do? I'll be a good Democrat and I'll keep my mouth shut. That's not the way to do it. Now, the other way not to do it is to create the circular firing squad and start saying, okay, let's attack Democrats for either not being pure enough or being too pure. Right? Whether it's my picking on Joe Manchin, which I've done a couple of times, and I actually, I mean, you know, I've met Joe a couple of times. I can't say I know him, but you know, we're neighbors. And I think he's a good guy. I disagree with some of his policies, but thank God, you know, we've got a Democrat from West Virginia in the Democratic coalition, even though I disagree with him on a lot of his positions. And on the other hand, you know, you got Elizabeth Warren and Bernie in the Senate. You got the entire House caucus, you know, progressive caucus. We can support. We just need to be supporting the party and working toward the classic ideals of the Democratic Party. And in the coming days, particularly over the holidays, as kind of the news cycle dials down a little, and because there's some amazing stuff I want to share with you today that is the news cycle, but I just wanted to get this whole media rant off my chest.
You know, I want to go back to playing for you, because we've got a lot of new listeners and viewers. Back to playing for you some of my favorite FDR clips and Lyndon Johnson clips to remind us what the Democratic Party really is. And thank God there are those people in the Democratic Party, because in the Republican Party, the Everett Dirksons of the Republican Party, the high integrity, genuine conservatives in the Republican Party who used to actually put America first. I'd even put Barry Goldwater in that category, and I realize it's a very unpopular position for any progressive to take. But Barry Goldwater, Everett Dirksen, those guys are dead and gone. The Republican Party is filled with shills for billionaires and oil companies, period.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
And this is going to get where it's getting really interesting, because Trump came in without that baggage, but he's filling his cabinet with it, which is a really bad sign.
Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom. We are here on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. I want to talk about that. I always like to ensure, I think it's important that everyone understand the full legacy of MLK, the radical legacy of MLK, the fact that Martin Luther King Jr. was not a beloved and popular figure when he was alive. People thought he was asking for too much, that MLK was assassinated with, at the very least, the acquiescence of the entire white supremacist structure in this country, which includes parts of the government or large swaths of the government. The full radical legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. is critical to remember, more critical than ever, probably, in this new age of Trump. MLK didn't have a dream of harmony, and then everyone was like, hey, that's a good idea. We should do that. There was struggle. There were losses. There was violence and bloodshed. John Lewis had his head bashed in by a sheriff who had lined up the law enforcement at that time just to fight against equal rights for African Americans in this country. And MLK was murdered, assassinated, lost his life in the struggle for civil rights. And now we're in an age where Donald Trump is going to be president in 4 days. The man he's nominated to be the top law enforcement agent in this country, Jeff Beauregard Sessions, had a letter written about him by MLK's wife, how he shouldn't get a judgeship, which he didn't get because he's so racist, that he was too racist for a judgeship in the 1980s. And now this man is supposed to enforce the civil rights enforcement that comes from all of the gains that MLK made through struggle and hardship, through the fact that the entire apparatus of the U.S. government was oftentimes aimed at him. It's important to remember, in this age of Trump, brought to us in part, first, I'll state, brought to us because the Democrats did not fight hard enough to show that they were on the side of the people, but also brought to us in part by the head of the FBI, James Comey, and a splinter faction within the FBI that did everything they could to deliver the White House to Donald Trump. Remember that there was another time when the head of the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, was playing all sorts of domestic politics, including wiretapping Martin Luther King Jr. Those wiretaps signed off by Bobby Kennedy, just in case you were wondering, by Bobby Kennedy, and J. Edgar Hoover wiretapped Martin Luther King Jr., and then he actually blackmailed him. The FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the top law enforcement agency in the land, the entire weight of the federal government was put on in a blackmailing fashion MLK to kill himself. That is the legacy of MLK. MLK did not, as I said, have a beautiful dream of harmony that everyone then agreed to. He fought against all of the powers arrayed against him. And yes, change happened, but it was not overnight. It was not easy. There was blood spilled in the street, not just MLK's. James Reeb, a minister at the church that I attend here in Washington, D.C., All Souls Unitarian, he went down. There was a call for people of faith to fight against the racist segregation, the empowerment, the legal empowerment of white supremacy in this country. And he was murdered for that. James Reeb was. And he was one of many people whose names are, James Reeb's name has not been forgotten, actually. We hold up his name at All Souls with the Reeb Voting Rights Project. But there's so many people who were in the struggle whose names aren't remembered. And everything they fought for is under threat right now. That's not an exaggeration. They just gutted the Voting Rights Act in the last Congress, and now Jeffrey Beauregard Sessions is going to be in charge of enforcing civil rights around the country. I mean, we are in a position where every person of conscience needs to stand up, needs to fight back, needs to understand that all of these fights are connected, that all of these fights are actually part of splitting us apart so that we can't stand in solidarity together against a global oligarchy hell-bent on stealing everything we have. And once they're finished stealing our money, they'll steal our health and our lives. And that's why this fight over health reform, healthcare and Obamacare and the destruction of Medicare and Medicaid, it's related to the gutting of the Voting Rights Act and getting Jeffrey Beauregard Sessions in there so that he won't enforce any of this. The voter suppression that we saw that also ushered Donald into the White House. This is all one fight. It is the few against the many, and we have to fight back if we're going to have any chance to have a future that we want to live in, that we want to see for our children and our grandchildren. This was my rant. I'm coming back after this break, and it's all calls for the rest of the show. We want to talk to you about what you're doing to fight back. We want to talk about what happened yesterday in the fight back. You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom, and we will be right back after this.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
Taking your calls on the Thom Hartmann Program right after this. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson. I am going to go straight to the phones because otherwise if I get talking, I never shut up. So I better go to the phones here. I'm sorry. I'm trying to get just John in Minneapolis on the line. John, are you on the line?
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can. Thanks, John.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I love to talk. But anyway, I just wanted to say, MLK, I think started out, with the problem of African American people and, how commodified they were, and they were a product in the economy, and they were used as slaves. Then they used them again as slaves after they, Reconstruction was undone by segregation.
John, because we both love talking, I want to point something that you said, because it's this fact that I think escapes a lot of people. During slavery, the South was richer than the North. The South was richer than the North, but it wasn't the labor of the slave economy. It was not the cotton that made the slave owners rich. You probably know this, John, but most people don't. It was the slaves themselves. It was human beings. Chattel slavery. It was human beings who were the actual value. That's why they fought a civil war, to protect slavery.
And actually, that slavery, if you really look at it, it was in the North also.
It was.
The people who started Brown University were one family that really exploited that labor and used that capital that was raised by that to develop this country. But I wanted to go on and say, now we're commodifying just about everything because, we've exploited this country to its fullest, and now we can start on healthcare because this is exactly how these people think. They want to commodify healthcare so that they can make money off of it. And whether people are covered or not, that's irrelevant to them. As long as the market is satisfied, then they're satisfied and their rich friends are satisfied. We want to do the same thing.
John. I'll go one further because I spend a lot of time looking at this, and the global oligarchs, the hedge funds, people like Leon Black and his hedge fund, right? They just bought a chemical factory in upstate New York. The chemical factory workers there, represented by CWA, they're out on strike right now because what's the first thing that the hedge fund does? They only have one business model. First, they steal your money. So first, they reached into the company and they stole the pension, right? They stole the pension. And then once they take all of your money, then they come for your health. Then they stole everyone's health care. That's how it works. They steal everyone's money and then their health care, which is their lives, because they profit. They literally profit on misery, death, and destruction. This is the global oligarchy that we're up against. We have to understand that they profit from chaos. They profit from it, and they only have one model. Reach into your pocket, steal your money. When they've stolen your last nickel, then they're coming for your health and your lives. You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm taking more of your calls right after this. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom, and I want to just get right to the phones, and I want to talk to Carol in South Carolina. Carol, you're on the air.
Yeah, hi, Alex. First, I want to thank you for that powerful witness. It wasn't a rant, but that powerful testimony speaking truth to power on Martin Luther King Jr. Day, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
Very eloquent. I wanted to say that the map on the national news last night, they had a map of states that participated in the rallies, or supposedly. Our state wasn't even on there. It looked like one of those, blue state, red state maps. Our state had at least 7 cities throughout the state of South Carolina doing healthcare rallies yesterday.
Yep.
I was the lead organizer here in the Grand Strand, and we had 2 locations, Myrtle Beach and Myrtle's Inlet, where I live. I know State Capitol had one, Charleston had one, Spartanburg had one, Rock Hill, and I'm losing track of a couple others that I know of.
There were over 500 satellite events.
Whoever updates those lists, please put us on your state, on your national map. And I would hazard to guess that all 50 states participated.
Carol, I think you're exactly right. There were, I think what's going on, you want my guess on what's going on? There were 2 separate efforts. There was one that was started with Bernie Sanders, called the Our First Stand, and there were 70 events there. And I was helping through my organization, Social Security Works, in the beginning, because there were only 3 weeks to plan all of them. They were hoping to get 5 events. That was their goal. They were like, maybe we can get 5 or so events, because they were looking to get events with senators and members of Congress, and, you know, do these events all over the country outside of D.C. And they ended up with 70, which was a huge thing, but that wasn't enough. There was way more appetite for doing things than just having events with elected officials. So Move On and a bunch of other organizations then held satellite events, which I bet you were plugged into and leading on. And there were well over 500 of them. And in fact, there were events in every state in the nation. And you had 70 huge press events with dozens of senators and members of Congress. You had over 500 events all around the country, like the one you led, Carol. And Donald Trump's not even president yet, right? I mean, we are actually seeing a unprecedented amount of resistance to what he is claiming, what Donald is claiming is his mandate. And the fact that he's saying something, and then Paul Ryan, Evil Eddie Munster, and Mitch McConnell, you know, Yertle the Turtle, although Mitch McConnell's the evil genius in the whole thing. I always keep an eye on him. The fact that he's quiet means he is up to really bad things. He is the guy who gets things done. So keep your eye on Mitch McConnell. Carol, you did your events yesterday. What was it? What did it look like? What was the appetite there? And do you think folks are going to stay in this fight as we go forward?
Well, we had in the 2 cities, Myrtle Beach and Murrells Inlet, we had about 40 people at each with signs waving them at traffic. We were on alongside major highways, and almost all the cars that went by tooted. The weather was great, so people also yelled support out the window. We did have one in my area where a guy yelled Trump, 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 but you'll have that around here. But it was very positive. We had 3 TV stations in this area covered, as well as 1 newspaper in this area, and those are on the web today. And so that it was great, and it really plugged people into getting to know each other. A lot of people exchanged phone numbers and names, and are going to have further meetups, and it was just a great day. Of course, we had perfect weather. It was 70 degrees yesterday and sunny.
Perfect.
I just want to segue into one thing too that other people might want to consider doing, especially if they aren't in big cities. Please write letters to your editor on these issues. I'm batting 1,000. I'm not bragging, but
brag away, Carol.
And letters to the editor really make a difference.
Carol, I want to ask you to do something. If you're interested, go to my organization. I'm the executive director of Social Security Works. We fight to protect and expand Medicare, Social Security, Medicaid.
And I'm on your mailing list.
I
just donated in your most recent appeal last week.
Well, thank you so much. Send me an email. All my contact information's on there too, because I am always trying. I've got a collection of activists who do LTEs, letters to the editor, and I'd love to work with you on that, because a lot of people want to do more, and this is something that people can do, but they kind of don't feel like they maybe can pull it off. So I'd love to connect you up with some folks, maybe lead a little group of activists, getting the word out into local newspapers. Don't ever let people tell you that doesn't matter. It definitely matters. It's local press that we're going to have to use. Carol, can I tell you one thing that I think everyone can do at
Sure.
Especially you're in South Carolina, so you've got Senators Scott and Graham.
Right.
Now, these are 2 Republicans, right? So you might feel, or not you, but people might feel, what do I do when now is when we need Republicans more than ever. And Lindsey Graham's got no love for Trump, it doesn't seem. Tim Scott is an interesting guy. He's a little bit, we don't totally know where he's going to be on a lot of stuff. Well, guess what? We only need 3 Republican senators to stand up and say, I will vote no on any reconciliation bill that includes Medicare. And all the reconciliation bills right now include Medicare. All of them do. All of their plans destroy Medicare and Medicaid. And nobody voted for that. Trump voters didn't vote for that. Clinton voters didn't vote for that. Nobody voted for that. And so we need to get calls into these Republican senators, Senator Graham, Senator Scott, with a really clear ask, a public pledge to vote no on a reconciliation bill that includes Medicare. That is something that we can do right now. That's a goal that we should have. And Social Security Works is launching a tour to find those 3 senators. Our top 3 targets are kind of obvious if you know the political landscape, but still, we should go with everybody. But I'm flying right to Maine today. We got an event in Lewiston, Maine tomorrow, Portland, Maine the next day. And we're going to be calling Susan Collins' office, and we're going to be demanding that she pledge to vote no. Right? She's been saying some things, but we want a pledge to vote no on a reconciliation bill that includes Medicare. And Carol, that's something that you can do. That's something that all the folks, the 80 folks that you were involved with, they can do. You can do a call a day if you want. You can put it in your letter to the editor and let people know that this is an action that they can take that will have, if we can find those 3 Republicans, we can stop this dead in its tracks.
Alex, I'll try to find your email on your website. I hope it's prominent.
It is. It's alawson@socialsecurityworks.org.
Thank you. I got it.
Thanks, Carol. Thanks for calling in. I'm going to go in the short time I have here. I want to go to Drew in Kansas. Drew, you are on the air.
Hey, Alex. Along the lines of single payer, I have to ask the obvious question. We have these 3 pillars that are basically crippling the common business. You know, we have pharmaceutical and the insurance companies, and then fossil fuel. For insurance, why don't these businesses go out of their way to sponsor Medicare for all and put their money behind it and put their name behind it?
Drew, it's a great question, and I think we can get there right now. Their businesses are under it depends on which side of business you're talking about. And, you know, if you talk to many of the associations that represent legitimate small businesses, they're way on board with the idea of an expanded Medicare that covers everybody. Because, as you know, that would be an enormous improvement. The entrepreneurial energy that would release in America, if you could actually think, I want to build and sell better widgets. And that's what you could focus your energy on. And you didn't have to focus your energy on, I also need to be a healthcare provider for my employees, right? I mean, like, it is a really huge burden that we put on American businesses that is unique in the world, that we also make them figure out how to provide their employees with healthcare. That is so. All I'm saying is I think there's an inertial effect when it comes to larger businesses, but most importantly, the Chamber of Commerce is just it's just connected to Donald and evil Eddie. They don't represent business owners. They represent, a handful of global oligarchs, and they pretend to represent business owners. So Drew, I don't know if you heard in the last segment, I was saying you got to call your senators and tell them to vote no on reconciliation that includes Medicare, because right now we have to fight for improved, expanded Medicare for everyone, and that's how we're going to protect Medicare. But we are in a battle for the life of Medicare right now, because Paul Ryan, his lifelong dream, what he fantasizes about is stealing millions of seniors' health care, forcing them into poverty so that they die in a ditch on the road alone. That's what Paul Ryan fantasizes about each and every night. It's how he gets to sleep at night, and we're going to stop him by fighting back. You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the organic wine company, ecowine.com. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com. Thom Hartmann University Book Club. Today we're reading from the Thom Hartmann Reader, which is excerpts from other books that I've written. This excerpt is from Threshold. And it starts out, we're on page 239. It starts out with, I went to Corral, Peru. It's a town that, or the first mother city, the first original city that has ever been discovered intact. It's 5,000 years old. It has been buried for 4,000 years. It was just excavated in the last decade. I went down to Peru. We did our radio show from there. And I met with Dr. Ruth Shady, who is the anthropologist and archaeologist who's running this. And she said, well, as we sat and ate, I asked her what was the most significant fact about Corral. Here, she said, the civilization was different, contrasting the Corral of 5,000 years ago with the city-states that were emerging in Egypt, India, and Asia at that time. The focus of the culture here was different. When this civilization was formed here, peace was very important. There was no war. She paused and looked at me with a glint in her eye. Why? Why was there no war? She asked, as if quizzing me. It turns out they found this city that had been there for 1,000 years, and there wasn't a single instrument of war or violence anywhere in the city. Music, dancing, flutes, amphitheaters, no war. So then we jump to page 244. Are we innately evil or good, warlike or peaceful? In 1634, in his book Leviathan, Thomas Hobbes stated our culture's assumption of the essentially evil nature of humans, saying that life without the iron fist of church or state would be war of every man against every man, resulting in a society where life is poor, nasty, brutish, and short. A generation later, Jean-Jacques Rousseau and John Locke challenged Hobbes, suggesting that evidence from tribes being discovered across Africa and the Americas by European explorers demonstrated that instead, the natural state of humankind was good, egalitarian, and peaceful. The thinking of Rousseau and Locke explicitly and overtly influenced the founders of the United States, particularly Thomas Jefferson, who saw verification in it in his own contact with Native Americans. Thus began America as an egalitarian experiment, an experiment that has been expanded and developed by nearly 100 other nations in the world that claim democracy, particularly the countries of Northern Europe, where once feared and warlike people, most notably the Vikings of Norway and Sweden, are now among the happiest and most peaceful and self-sufficient people in the world. Yet the Hobbeses of the world are currently ascendant in terms of both war on humans and war on the environment. But what should be done? As I said in Leonardo DiCaprio's environmental documentary, The 11th Hour, the problem is not a problem of technology. The problem is not a problem of too much carbon dioxide. The problem is not a problem of global warming. The problem is not a problem of waste. All of those things are symptoms of the problem. The problem is the way that we are thinking. The problem is fundamentally a cultural problem. It's at the level of our culture that this illness is happening. In my books, I've shared stories from all around the world of cultures that have matured, awakened, and found ways to live in peace, harmony, and ecological balance, and the fate of others that have not. Some are pre-city, Aboriginal and tribal people. Some are modern communities. Some are fully developed city-states moving quickly in the direction of peace. All offer us a new vision of how life can be in a world where the core assumptions of modern culture are challenged and modified. This is not a radical or new age or easily dismissed concept. It started with the Enlightenment of the 17th century. Its first experiment was the founding of the United States in the 18th century.
flawed but a great experiment. It flowered throughout the world throughout the 19th century as nation after nation flipped from warrior king states to democracies. It found global acceptance in the 20th century with the foundation of the United Nations, the first international organization whose single explicit purpose was to create, promote, and maintain worldwide peace. And now in the 21st century, as war against both humans and against nature is increasingly being viewed with horror by people around the world, movements are springing up all over the planet to reject the immature cultural paradigms of the past and move us into a post-carbon, post-warfare, egalitarian, and peaceful world where there's room for both humans and for all other life. Then we start a chapter, why and when did war begin? If it's true, as scientists from Peter Farb to Rianne Eisler to Ruth Shady point out, that a prime differentiator between war societies and peaceful societies is the role of power relationships between men and women, the question is raised, why and when does war begin, and how is it related to the relationship between the sexes? Most pre-literate cultures, from those in the Arctic to those in the southernmost tips of South America and Africa, were largely peaceful before contact with technology and our culture. While there was conflict, and often violent conflict, it rarely reached the proportions of organized, sustained, legally sanctioned mass murder that we today refer to as war. As the anthropologist Peter Farb has documented, some Native American societies, for example, the Shoshone, didn't even have a word for war in their vocabulary. Others used organized games to resolve conflicts. Many theories have been put forward for how and why the warrior mentality took over. And then, it goes on to whether this started with animal husbandry or whether it started with agriculture, or where did war begin, and some interesting stuff. So it's in the Thom Hartmann Reader.
Hey, want to hear that clip again? Subscribe to the Thom Hartmann Program on YouTube to see all your favorite show highlights.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom. We're going to go right to the phones here. And let's go to Casey in Florida. Casey, you're on the line.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Well, I want to make two things I've been holding for a while, so you touched on a lot of things, but there's one thing that nobody's been saying all morning, whether it was Stephanie Miller or you, is the blunders of the Democratic Party that they voted against lowering prescription drug costs, and it's a shame. We can say about Trump and all this other stuff, but the Democratic Party is just as bad as the Republican Party. They are in bed with Wall Street, the pharmaceutical companies, and they are no better than the Republican Party. So this whole thing that the Democrats are the good cops and the Republicans are bad cops is a crock.
Casey, I'm going to figure out how to get a hold of you in 4 years. Actually, I'm going to do it in just 1 year. And I want to hear you say that again after we see what the Republicans do. But you're not going to find anyone. See, I've been working to lower drug costs in this country. I moved to D.C., got my master's in D.C. while working in an outreach HIV clinic here in D.C. after working in one in Chicago for one reason only, and that's to smash the pharmaceutical industry into pieces and build a fundamentally different system in its place. So the Democrats are not the same as the Republicans. It's just like, it's a very, I'm sorry, but it's like it's a very childish point of view. They're all bad. Throw them all out. Well, who put the amendment in? It was Bernie Sanders, and Bernie Sanders caucuses with one party, doesn't he? Yes. So obviously, Bernie Sanders, the party that he works in, is better than the party that opposes him on everything. On pharmaceutical issues, it's just totally true that the Democrats have for decades been really close with the pharmaceutical industry. Look at Obamacare. It was a deal cut with pharma that meant that nothing happened to pharma. Pharma spent $150 million to try to get Obamacare passed. So yes, that's true, and that's got to change. And we're at a point right now where that can change. But, you know, when the Republicans are going to stop working for pharma and Wall Street? Never. Never. So, you know, there is a massive difference between the parties. We need to have a democratic socialist takeover of the Democratic Party, make it the party of the people. It is totally true that the party of what should be the party of the people or the party of the many has become the party of the few, which means that the party of the few or the Republicans has become the party of one in this authoritarian figure that is Donald Trump. But I kind of hope that one of the things that comes out of this election is to actually put to bed forever the conception that, oh, there's no difference between the two parties. There is. There's a huge difference between the two parties. There's a massive difference between the two parties. There are horrible people in both parties, but when you look at the parties and the bureaucracy that's put in place, there's a big difference between Jeffrey Beauregard Sessions and Loretta Lynch, right? There's a huge difference between those two people as the top law enforcement officers in the land. Does that mean Loretta Lynch is perfect? No. But children or people who have a very small conception of how things work are disappointed when someone's not perfect. And so they're like, oh, this person's not perfect, so I'm going to put this literal white supremacist KKK loving dude in charge of as the top law enforcement agent in this land. There is a huge difference between the parties. That does not mean that the Democrats don't have to do much more. That's what we need to do. We need to ensure that we take over the Democratic Party and make it represent the people. But I'm coming back to you, Casey, in a year, and I want to see if, you know, you still hold the opinion that the two parties are the same, because, you know, I have very, if you can't tell, I have very little time for that sentiment, because I have a theory of change. I'm busy working on trying to take on the pharmaceutical industry, to get an improved, expanded Medicare that covers everyone. And so you have to have an understanding of who does what to get there. It's true, and we should be super clear. The Democrats far too often right now are in the pocket of the pharmaceutical industry. That's true. That whole DLC third way brand of the Democratic Party has held sway for far too long. It's basically an overreaction to the Reagan era. And, you know, like, oh, the only way to win is to be Republican light. But the difference between the two parties is that when the Democrats act like Republicans, that's what you're saying. When they act like Republicans, well, the Republicans are Republicans. They are the party that represents the extractive industries. They're the party, like, there's no difference between the two parties. John Kerry is the Secretary of State right now, and Rex Tillerson is going to be the Secretary of State in 4 days. Rex Tillerson, who ran Exxon, is going to be the Secretary of State, which in most, you know, in the way you look at the power of the executive, is the second most powerful person in the government, the person in charge of our foreign policy. The Secretary of State is going to be the head of ExxonMobil. Why? Because there's about $3 trillion locked up in the sanctions that we have on Russia right now. $1 trillion goes to Exxon, $2 trillion to Russia. That's why he's in charge. That's the whole reason. That's his whole reason d'etre and in that position is to get rid of that so that ExxonMobil can make $1 trillion and the oligarchs in charge of Russia can make $2 trillion, and we can continue watching the planet burn. So yes, in fact, there is a difference between the two parties. Does that mean that we can't make, that we don't need to make one party much better? No, we do. We saw that. The reason that the Democrats lost is because the Democrats for too long have not been fighting on the side of the people. And we need the Democrats to fight clearly and loudly on the side of the people. And I get a little hopeful when I see things like yesterday, the 70 events happening around the country with all sorts of elected officials who are standing up, and they're standing up to Trump's agenda, to the agenda of McConnell and Ryan, the wholesale looting of the American public that is going to go down. Now, we need the Democrats to do more. We need them to be bold. We need them to fight for the people. And when they fight for the people and with the people will fight with them. That's what we need to do. It's a political revolution. You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Austin, filling in for Tom.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Taking your calls right after this. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Austin, filling in for Tom. We're going to go right to the phones. We're going to Lee in Louisiana. Lee, you're on the air.
Yes, sir, Mr. Alex. How are you today?
Good. How are you, Lee?
I'm upright and breathing.
There you go.
There's a lot of divisiveness, and I think a lot of it comes from the fact people are confusing democracy with capitalism and capitalism with democracy. Capitalism is not necessarily democracy. I know you've heard the term to hammer everything as a nail. With the Trump administration, we are headed for sheer unmitigated disaster. When it comes to governing, not everything has a capitalist solution.
Yeah, I would say many things don't. The drive to pretend that everything needs to have a profit. There are things that are public goods, and we need to recognize those. Lee, I'm sorry, I'm just vociferously agreeing with you that it's ridiculous. People point at like the bullet train in Japan or the airports and infrastructure in China, and then they bemoan that here in America. And you're like, yeah, that's because the government invests in those things around the world. We're the only country that like somehow believes that magically things like that are supposed to happen.
Yes, sir. And some of our most successful enterprises have been government driven. Our highway system, you can point to different aspects of our society that aren't necessarily capitalist driven. In my state in particular, I live in Louisiana. We are a very red state. Listening to a lot of the right radio hosts, they're actually going, they've started ignoring aspects of our Democratic legislature. They're actually going after moderate Republicans to try to push it even further right.
Yeah.
And please forgive me. I don't have the piece of paper in front of me, but I wrote down a website. It was started by a lady here in South Louisiana to list companies that are based in blue states so that people won't spend money with them. After this last election, it's almost like they've been energized to drive out the social good. In other words,
but let me tell you something, Lee, because I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying, and I think it's important to see and recognize what's going on. But I want to tell you something. None of these voters. So there's a lot of misinformation out there, the submerged state concept where, it's the whole get your government hands off my Medicare concept, right? Like a lot of folks don't understand that Social Security and Medicare, things that they love. And since I work on this, I know in Louisiana, Social Security is just as popular in Louisiana as it is in California or Massachusetts. When people see that these are the programs that are under attack, that it's their Social Security checks that the government's going to try to steal, that is their Medicare that DC is going to try to eviscerate. So, Lee, we want to call your senators, Cassidy and Kennedy, and tell them pledge to vote no on a reconciliation bill that includes Medicare. Thanks so much for your call. You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom, and we will be right back. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom. We're going to the phones here. Let's go to Shala and also in Louisiana. Shala, you're on the air.
It's actually Shayla, but that's okay. I guess it's a popular day for Louisiana.
Shayla?
Yes.
Shayla, sorry about that. Shayla, you are on the air.
I wanted to talk about the prescription bill a little bit because I've been having to explain this a lot to people. I have MS, so I have a chronic disease that has a very high prescription cost for its medicine. It's actually on that little list that Bernie Sanders puts out a lot, Copaxone. He actually has it very lowballed on his thing. He needs to adjust his numbers. It was $65,000 a year last year. They have now increased it to $76,000 a year for this year.
It's outrageous.
Yeah, exactly. And the difference in me having this medicine and not having this medicine is being able to walk and work, live a productive life.
So, Shayla, I don't know for certain, but maybe you do if you've looked into it. Do you know if it was developed with government funding?
I haven't looked into that.
So, Shayla, you want to just – I'm going to let you finish your comment, but I'm going to guarantee you that at least some of it was, because the way it works, there's multiple patents on things, was developed with public funding at either the NIH or through a university granted by the NIH. So I haven't looked into this specific drug. I will to ensure, but it is just a fact that the vast majority of research in this country on pharmaceutical drugs is funded by us. So you paid for it, and then now they're charging you $76,000.
Oh, I'm sure that they are. Actually, the thing that I kind of wanted to point out to people is this drug in Canada costs $12,000 a year. So it is manufactured in the United States by an American company that is then imported into Canada.
Right.
So the prescription bill is the re-import of that medicine. So, and I'm currently working, so I'm not on ACA insurance or anything like that. I get it through my employer. What happens is my insurance company actually pays the $76,000 a year less my copay to give me my medicine. Well, but the thing is if the lifetime caps come back, then all of a sudden I'm only going to be able to have even my employer insurance for 13 years.
Yeah, or a person who doesn't have an employee-sponsored health, employer-sponsored health, right? I mean, what are they supposed to do?
They just get kicked off. But then if you get just the difference between getting it in Canada at $12,000 a year, all of a sudden I don't reach my lifetime cap for 83 years. So that's a savings of $64,000 a year. And if you take that and divide it over the number of members in my group, which is 500, that's a savings of $128 per person in my medical group and my employer. And they want to talk about the reason that our insurance rates keep going up each year. It's because of my prescription drugs. I'm one person, and I can save each person that I work with $128 a year.
And Shayla, let me tell you about some other things that make it even more ridiculous. The whole setup is ridiculous. We pay to develop the drugs. Taxpayers pay to develop the drugs. Taxpayers pay to grant and protect the monopolies, which is the only reason that the company can charge $76,000 per year is because of taxpayer-granted monopolies. And then we pay the highest drug prices anywhere in the world. And you know where the second highest drug prices in the world are? Canada. But even then, if we can just import our drugs from Canada, where, you know, this drug costs $12,000 instead of $76,000. Massive savings. And despite the propaganda that, you know, some corporate Dems and others put out about safety fears, and it's the same drug. It's the same drug. It's not the Canadian version.
If you look at Canada's safety standards, they're far better than ours.
It's the same drug. And you find me the rash of stories about Canadians, you know, falling ill due to bogus prescription drugs. You won't find it there. You'll find it here in America because people are going to illicit sources because our drugs are so high that they have no other choice. But here's
it's manufactured here. We're just
exactly
Canada just to ship it back to us.
It's the same drug. But Shayla, here's the part that always boggles my mind, and Bernie Sanders says it a lot. We can import lettuce from Mexico. We could, you know, like get shoes from wherever, but we can't bring the drugs in from Canada. But just to make the whole ridiculousness apparent, you could get a plane ticket, fly to Canada with your prescription, buy the drug in Canada legally with your prescription, legally fly home with the drug bought in Canada at the discounted rate, and that's all legal. That's totally legal to do. And like, you're in a specific situation, so it might not make sense for you, but for many people, it actually makes perfect sense because the savings is so great that you can fly to Canada, buy the drugs there, fly home. That's all legal. Personal importation of drugs with a prescription is legal, but the pharmaceutical industry has made it so that we can't just do that, and we can't just actually have those drugs imported from Canada. You know, I think reimportation is great, but I don't care if the manufacturer of the drug is outside of America either. So I want it to be importation. The standards, the safety standards in Canada are as high, if not higher, than they are here. And I don't think we should just be able to import drugs from Canada. I think we should be able to have parallel importation from wherever we have standards of safeties that are adequate and similar to America, which is the entire advanced economies. They have better, because their system isn't under current threat as ours, the FDA is right now. The dude who's going to be put in charge of the FDA doesn't even believe that drugs should be tested after efficacy. So after phase 1, he's just like, the drug should be out there and then people will die from them. And you're like, oh, that one doesn't work that well. Somehow the miracle of the marketplace is going to take care of this. I'm sorry, Shayla. Your point is incredibly well taken. The little bill that came up that's making a lot of news was actually an amendment on the budget, so that wasn't going to change law. And nothing happened there that hasn't happened dozens of times in the past. The only difference right now is that people are paying attention and they're outraged, and we should be, and we need to keep making noise. We need to keep fighting back. You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Thom Hartmann, and we'll be right back after this.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be taking more of your calls on the Thom Hartmann Program right after this.
And I am taking the position that Jim DeMint took relative to Barack Obama, and frankly, that Donald Trump took relative to Barack Obama. Donald Trump spent 8 years saying Barack Obama was an illegitimate president, that he didn't even have the right to be president. That was Donald Trump's position, and he did not swerve or sway from it. And even at the, even during the campaign, he was saying, well, okay, yeah, he was born here, but I have this horrible feeling that the Democrats are going to say, oh, finally we can help the country.
Because Democrats love to help the country, right? They're, most Democrats. I mean, that's the whole point of the Democratic Party. We're here for the people. We're here for the country. And so if Donald Trump wants to spend $1 trillion on infrastructure, Obama desperately wanted to do that. The Republicans filibustered it. It actually passed Congress. The Republicans filibustered it. And so why, by the way? They did that so that people would be seriously pissed off at the Democrats and at the president. And it worked. Now, the question is, will it work? Because it worked because of a complicit media. Every single time the Republicans filibustered something that the Democrats passed that was actually good for America, the long-term extension of unemployment. Unemployment was extended for, they wanted to extend it for another year during the crisis back in 2009, 2010. You would think any rational person would be in favor of that. The Republicans filibustered it in the Senate. Nancy Pelosi got it out of the House. And by the way, it got more than 50 votes in the Senate, so according to the Constitution, it passed. But the Republicans filibustered it. So was the headline in the New York Times, Republicans block long-term extension of unemployment? No. I don't remember the exact headline, but the story at the time was that, long-term extension of unemployment fails to get enough votes to pass the Senate. Now, my guess is, given how good the Republicans are at manipulating and owning the media, basically, literally owning it, but also in controlling, what it says and how it does it by virtue of intimidation. My guess is that they will, if the Democrats do an obstructionist strategy for 4 years, like the Republicans have for the last 8, my guess is the media will call it out, whereas they refused to call it out when Mitch McConnell and Paul Ryan and Mr. Drunk before him were doing that. But in fact, this hit me over the weekend. I was watching one of the shows, and they had I think they had Jane Sanders on, and the question was, it was Wolf Blitzer, and he said, is your husband going to run for president in 4 years? And she said, Wolf, that's the wrong question. The question should be, what are we going to do for working people? What are we going to do to bring jobs back to the United States? What are we going to do to, and I'm doing this from memory, so this may not be what she said, but it was in that vein, right? What are we going to do to bring families together? What are we going to do to make sure everybody gets health care? And Wolf, had I been Wolf, my answer to that would have been, okay, what are we going to do? But he didn't want to go there. And it suddenly hit me. I had been wondering throughout this election, why is it that the media refuses to discuss issues? For a year and a half, this campaign has been going on, and the media has consistently refused. Most people have no idea what Paul Ryan intends to do. They have no idea. They have no idea what the issues are. Why? I think it's because whenever an issue is discussed, the issues, of course, reflect poorly on the Republicans because all across America, the vast majority of Americans agree with the Democrats and the Democratic Party. And the media strategists in the Republican Party want to make sure that the American people don't know what the Republican Party's actual plans are, what they've actually done in the past. And so you've got these groups that come out, and every time one of the media organizations actually talks about the issues, they trash them. They trash them mercilessly. And so the media has gotten so shell-shocked over the last 20 years that this has been going on that they're afraid to discuss issues. Instead, they just discuss personality. Remember how Bernie used to go on TV and they would ask him about, well, what do you think about Hillary Clinton's favorability like? And he'd say, it's irrelevant. Let's talk about the issues. And it used to really upset the, poor Wolf Blitzer, right? Because he's been cowed. Well, he's been cowed not to talk about the issues when there's a Democrat in power. Will he talk about the issues when there's a Republican in power? Somehow I doubt it. But will he go after the Democrats? Somehow I think so.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
You know, when Obama was elected, Rush Limbaugh said, "I hope he fails." I'm saying the same thing about Trump. Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Austin, filling in for Tom. And I want to get right to the phones, even though I keep clicking the wrong button on the phone screen here. So bear with me. But I want to talk about two events that we have coming up in Maine. For anyone listening in Maine, I'm going to be flying to Maine right after I get off of the show here, because tomorrow, Tuesday, January 17th, from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m., we're having a hands-off Medicare event at the Franco Center in Lewiston, Maine. And I'll be joining John Bowser-Bauman, formerly of Sha Na Na fame, or of Sha Na Na fame, formerly a member of Sha Na Na, who's also a friend of mine, a great activist and advocate for Social Security and Medicare. That's Tuesday, tomorrow, from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. at the Franco Center in Lewiston, Maine. The next day, Wednesday, from 12 noon to 1 p.m., we have an event at the First Parish in Portland, Maine, which is, I think, just one block away from where the big Our First Stand event was yesterday, part of the 70 events around the country. So these two events are part of our hands-off Medicare tour of America, where we will be, the we here is Social Security Works, which you can find more information about the tour of these two events at socialsecurityworks.org. But we're going to be going around the country. We're looking for 3 Republican senators who will pledge to vote no on a reconciliation bill that includes Medicare. All of the discussion right now, the current reconciliation bill right now, we don't know all the details in it, but we do know what they're talking about. They include Medicare. So when they say they're going to get rid of Obamacare, they are. They're going to just throw 30 million people off of their health insurance, let them die. They don't care, because it gives them the ability to give tax cuts to the super wealthy. But they're also going to destroy Medicare and Medicaid. So we need to find, we can stop this, though, because nobody voted to destroy Medicare. So the first 2 stops in our hands-off Medicare tour, tomorrow, 2 p.m., the Franco Center in Lewiston, Wednesday, 12 noon, First Parish in Portland. If you want more information on those 2 events, you can go to socialsecurityworks.org. If you want to take part, but you can't make it to the events themselves, make a phone call to Susan Collins. That's what we're doing tomorrow and Wednesday. We're gonna talk to the people who are coming to the events, and then I have cell phones at the events that we're going to hand out to the people who are going to directly call Susan Collins' office and demand that she pledge to vote no on a reconciliation bill that includes Medicare. Call your senators. If they're Republicans, tell them to vote no on, call everybody, though. Actually, I should be clear. Call everybody, but especially if you have Republican senators, tell them to pledge to vote no on a reconciliation bill that includes Medicare. We feel our best targets are Susan Collins in Maine, Heller in Nevada, and Murkowski in Alaska. So those are our top 3, but we have a tour that continues all around the country through the red states. Anywhere where there are Republican senators, we're going to try to find 3 of them to vote no on a reconciliation bill that includes Medicare. So we need your help in making that happen. I am going to go to the phones now, and I'm going to go to, let's go to Charles in Louisiana. Man, I'm really sticking with Louisiana.
Hey, Alex, how you doing?
Good, Charles. How are you?
I'm okay, I guess. I just wanted to make a statement, and then I'd like to ask you a question.
Mm-hmm.
A little while ago, you gave the reason why you thought the Democrats lost the election. I'm sorry, but I disagree with you.
Okay.
I think the reason the Democrats lost the election was because Debbie Wasserman Schultz had a finger on the scale against Bernie, and that's why the Democrats lost it. And my question to you is, if Reince Priebus's middle name was Sid, what would his name be?
I don't know. You're gonna have to. You're gonna have to. I can't think of that one. But your comment, I think, I'm more interested in. I understand where you're coming from, but to be honest, I'm not trying to convince you. I'm not going to try to convince you. I will tell you that everybody who I know that worked on Bernie Sanders' campaign, they knew they had an uphill battle against the party apparatus. They knew it. It was not. It was known beforehand that they would have an uphill battle. It was, quote unquote, unfair. There were things that were done that were unfair, but that's not what lost the election. I mean, like again, you can believe what you want to believe, but I think that it's important. I agree with Bernie Sanders on this. I agree wholeheartedly with Senator Sanders on this, and Senator Warren and some other champions. The Democrats lost because it's not just the presidency, right? I mean, in 2010, we lost the House. We lost state houses and state legislatures throughout that time. We lost the Senate, and now we've lost the White House. All right, so we've had a string of losses across the country. A lot of that is because we're up against incredible concentrated power, right? Wealth, money power is profound, right? When you have people who profit. The guy, the main funder when there was the Koch-Mercer split, and the Kochs kind of went this way, and the other big funder in the right wing, who actually was a Cruz supporter, and then he supported Donald Trump, his name's Mercer. This guy's in it because he's a hedge funder, right? He doesn't know how to create anything. He's never created anything in his life. He just destroys. That's what hedge funds do. They just extract resources. They steal people's money. The whole reason that he isn't interested in politics is because he owes the public coffers $6 billion. And so he doesn't want to pay that tax bill. I mean, like, I can't look into his heart, but if you look at the facts, that's what it sure appears like to me, that's the whole reason he's interested in politics. So when you're up against people who are, peeved about a $6 billion of paying their fair share in taxes, they're willing. These folks have billions. They're going to throw it at us. But I think more profound than the fact that we're up against money power, which will never change, is the only thing that beats money power is people power. The only thing that beats money power is people power. But when the Democrats started kind of operating more like, oh, well, we want some of those big donors. We're going to listen to the donors more than the people, so that, they're the party that's just going to cut Social Security benefits less than the Republicans, right? Like, that's when we started disconnecting. In fact, that's when we started losing. In 2010, there was the Bowles-Simpson Commission put into place under President Obama. The BS Commission with their BS plan to cut Social Security and Medicare. That's a problem. Before that, not a single banker went to jail. Not to jail, to prison. They destroyed the world economy, and not a single banker went to prison. The foreclosure crisis evaporated wealth across this country. Tens of thousands of Americans were put into position because of fraud perpetrated against them. Read David Dayen's book, Chain of Title. And not a single banker went to prison. Not only that, they got trillions of our tax dollars to bail them out, while the homeowners got a program that from its start, on purpose, was fatally flawed. The HAMP program, that didn't help people. That's the problem. We need to remember, the Democratic Party needs to remember who it is and who it represents. And we need to force the Democratic Party to remember that. The Democratic Party needs to own the fact that the Democrats created Social Security, the Democrats created Medicare, the Democrats created the Voting Rights Act. This is the party that represents both Social Security, Medicare, the New Deal, and the Civil Rights Act. This is one party that represents all of that. We need to fight at the same time on all of those fronts. We never win by fighting just against. You don't win by just saying, oh, well, these billionaire, parasitic global oligarchs are out to steal our money and we're not them. That's not what you win on. What you win on is saying, I'm going to fight for an expanded Medicare that covers everyone. The one part of our healthcare system that works is traditional Medicare. It's the part that not only covers people, it also keeps costs down because it doesn't answer to the hedge funders on Wall Street. So we not only can't cut Medicare, we have to expand Medicare, traditional Medicare, the government side of Medicare. We need to get rid of all of the private health insurance that's been foisted into Medicare. We have to fight for our vision. Healthcare as a right. That's the party that the Democrats have to be. And when the Democrats are that party, when we, the people, see ourselves represented by that party, then we fight as hard as we can for that party. And people power beats money power. But a little bit of money power does not beat money power. We saw that. Hillary Clinton's campaign had a ton of money. But it turns out that money doesn't vote. People vote. The Democrats need to remember that. So, Charles, I understand where you're coming from. I disagree. I think the Democratic Party wins when the Democratic Party embraces the policies that Senator Sanders laid out in his primary and continues to fight for right now. The Democratic Party wins when we fight for our values and what we believe in, which are what the American people believe in. The economic policies, the healthcare policies, these are the views of the vast majority of Americans, not Democrats, Republicans, Trump voters, independents. You know, they want to, the polling came out that showed that the majority, so it was the plurality of Republicans wanted to replace Obamacare with a expanded Medicare covering everybody. Republicans. Our ideas are the ideas that are popular. No one voted to destroy Medicare, but that's what the Republican Party is going to do. Charles, thank you so much for your call. We're going to win when we stand up together, raise our voices together. We saw that yesterday, 70 events, 500 satellite events. Every state in the union had an event fighting back against Trump, Ryan, and McConnell. We need to do more. We need your voice. We're going to win by fighting together. You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We'll be right back taking more of your calls after this. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom, and we're going to go to Don in Washington. Don, you're on the air.
Yeah, thanks, Alex, for taking my call. I was going to talk about the so-called Russian hacking into our system, but the last topic you were talking about reminded me, and I've been thinking about this for some time. I don't know if you noticed, but there's an artificial bubble being created in the stock market and the real estate, so we're going to have corrections coming. Probably, I figure later this year, that will be 2008 all over again. And we'll have to bail out the banks, and one of the banks that will be bailed out will be Chase Manhattan, which has all the Social Security money invested in it, and then they'll use that money to bail out the bank. And
Social Security is not invested in any bank.
I thought it was.
Nope. Social Security is all by law in U.S. Treasury bonds held in trust for the American people.
Yeah. Well, there's still a way that they could do that by, I think the government's bond rating has been lowered because of the last near global recession. Just a couple, just quibbles on
It's really clear that there will be market corrections, but if you or I could predict with a surety when that happens, that's a skill that no one has. But you're right. Because no one was punished for the last Wall Street led a collapse of the economy. Why should they change? They paid these huge fines that were teeny tiny percentages of the profits that they made from doing what they did. So obviously they're going to do it again, right? I mean, it's like, this is what they do. If they can make $1 trillion and have to pay, even if it's a huge fine of $30 billion, guess what? It's less than what they made. No one went to prison. They still got their golden yachts, there's no way that it's not going to happen again. Again, if you read David Day, and he's been looking at a few asset classes because, maybe it's not going to be in real estate, but there's a lot of places that you can pump up that Wall Street, this is the only way Wall Street knows how to make money. It's got only a handful it's got like one modality, which is figure out some place to lamprey like attach to, fill it up with debt, load people up with debt, and then extract resources from them forever. So Don, the only way they're going to come after Social Security, because they are going to come after Social Security, but they have to cut benefits. That's how they get away with not paying it back. And we saw Sam Johnson at the end of the last Congress put in a bill to do just this, that would actually just cut benefits so much that it was just taking money, right? So the Social Security was taking our money in, but it never would return it in the form of benefits. And therefore, it would just continually grow in the bonds, would just continually grow. That's how they steal our money. It's by cutting our benefits. So we can't let them do that. Don, thank you so much for your call. You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom, and we'll be right back after this. And we're back on the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom. And we are joined right now by Victoria from Talk Media News to let us know what's going on out there in the world. Victoria, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much indeed. On this Martin Luther King Jr. Day, the slain civil rights leader's daughter, Bernice King, has been speaking out, and she says that the nation still has a choice between chaos and community. And she says, at the end of the day, the Donald Trump come and go, she said to the Associated Press, but we still have to find a way to create what her father called the beloved community. So she said that. Also, First Lady Michelle Obama has tweeted her support for Reverend John Lewis, who is in the midst of a very public feud with President-elect Donald Trump, thinking of Dr. King and great leaders like Rep. John Lewis, who carry on his legacy. May their example be our call to action, said the tweet posted on Michelle Obama's account today. Also, President-elect Donald Trump is scheduled to meet today with the eldest son of the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. to discuss the legacy and observe the holiday of the civil rights icon, which is coming as a surprise to some people after the very public feud. So that's going on. Vice President-elect Mike Pence, are you there?
Yes, Victoria, we're here.
Okay. Visited the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial in Washington, D.C. today. And Representative John Lewis said today that there is a moral obligation to act and speak up when you see something that is not just. Never give in. Stand up. Speak up. when you're seeing something that is not right, not fair, not just, you have a moral obligation to do something, to say something, and not be quiet, Lewis told the attendees at the breakfast honoring Martin Luther King Jr.
Yeah, the incredible disconnect between, what I just can't believe that Donald Trump would get in a Twitter fight with John Lewis this of all weekends, and that, that Pence defended that is even more mind-boggling to me. And then they tripled down because I believe that Kellyanne or one of his propaganda people went on and said that he gains power from picking a fight with a civil rights icon like John Lewis. So, I think what you're saying is John Lewis is actually invited to these events that are honoring the civil rights era because John Lewis is a hero of the era. John Lewis stood up. He saw inequality, and through his entire life, he saw injustice, and through his entire life, he stood up, fought back against that, and faced vicious attacks by organized power. His head was cracked when he was crossing the bridge to fight legal, racist, white supremacist segregation. I don't want to be too preachy on it, but, I see these small people because they take their cues from Donald, and then other small people start attacking a civil rights hero like John Lewis. And all I can think of is no one will ever remember them. No one is going to remember them the way that John Lewis is remembered, the way that, he was attacked and his book immediately sold out on Amazon. And, his story is a story of struggle for justice in America.
His story is the story of America, it seems.
It really is. And I think now more than ever, we need to really be able to understand the full story of America.
In another story, a new report by the World Economic Forum that has come out today. The annual meeting of the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, starts tomorrow, has some interesting rankings. Now, this is a ranking of 30. The United States ranked 29th out of 30 in net income inequality, 29th in wealth inequality, and 28th in poverty rate. The U.S. did rank 4 in median income. Among the world's 30 most advanced economies, the U.S. ranked first in a handful of categories, including small business ownership, number 4 in labor productivity, 12th in employment percentage, 20th in education and skills, and 28th in life expectancy.
Victoria from Talk Media News, thank you so much for bringing us the news. I hear Davos, Switzerland, and I remember 2 numbers that just came out as the elite gather there to talk about how did this happen? What went wrong? They can't puzzle it out. Well, here, I've got it. It's because the richest 6 individuals in the world have as much wealth as the bottom 50% of the people in the world. 6 people own as much wealth as the bottom 50.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by the Aiden Forecast, an investment newsletter with weekly updates of leading market indicators and a monthly deep dive into what the details of the economy and the markets mean for investors and retirees. On the web at aidenmarkets.com. Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by ecowine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the organic wine company, ecowine.com. The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com. It's Thom Hartmann University Book Club. In the weeks after 9/11, Rodale Press reached out to a bunch of folks, me, the Dalai Lama, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, Rabbi David Wolpe, Thich Nhat Hanh, Chuck Colson, Neil Donald Walsh, and asked for thoughts about a spiritual response to the attack on America. The result was a book, From the Ashes. And this is from the chapter that I wrote, The Goddess of Democracy, a Sacred Archetype to Heal the World. People argue that the terrorist attacks against the United States reflect a war between one religion and another, or between the poor and rich of the world. While there may be an element of truth to each, I'd suggest that the real war here is between the 11th century and the 21st century. And while our leaders, and until our leaders figure that out, we may miss some great opportunities. Back in the Dark and Middle Ages, the Catholic Church ruled Europe. Women were often forbidden to go out in public unless properly covered, and were explicitly the property of men. Justice was swift and severe, ranging from disfigurement to torture to death in horrific ways, and most often meted out with the approval or supervision of clerics. The power behind the power of all the royal families of Europe was the Pope. On November 27, 1095, Pope Urban gave one of history's most famous speeches to the Council of Clermont in France, calling for a holy war against Islam to unite factious Europe. Dr. E.L. Skip Knox of Boise State University in Idaho summarized the Pope's speech. The noble race of Franks must come to the aid of their fellow Christians in the East. The infidel Turks are advancing into the heart of Eastern Christendom. Christians are being oppressed and attacked. Churches and holy places are being defiled. Jerusalem is groaning under the Saracen yoke. The Holy Sepulchre is in Muslim hands and has been turned into a mosque. The Franks must stop their internal wars and squabbles. Let them go instead against the infidel and fight a righteous war. God himself will lead them, for they will be doing his work. There will be absolution and remission of sins for all who die in the service of Christ. Here they are poor and miserable sinners. There they will be rich and happy. Let none hesitate. They must march next summer. God wills it. Thus began a war between two different medieval cultures, 11th century Catholic and 11th century Muslim. Over the next few centuries, the Catholics, with their battle cry of Deus Vult, God wills it, were often victorious against the Muslims, whose only crime defined by the Pope was that they were living in the Holy Land of the Catholic Church. Medieval historian Raymond of Aguilles wrote the following eyewitness account of the attack and seizure of Jerusalem in 1099 by the triumphant Christian crusaders. Quote, some of our men cut off the heads of their enemies. Others shot them with arrows so they fell from the towers. Others tortured them longer by casting them into the flames. Piles of heads, hand, and feet were to be seen in the streets of the city. It was necessary to pick one's way over the bodies of men and horses. But these were small matters compared to what happened at the Temple of Solomon, a place where religious services were ordinarily chanted. What happened there? If I tell the truth, it will exceed your powers of belief. So let it suffice to say, this much at least, that in the temple and portico of Solomon, men rode in blood up to their knees and bridle reins. End of quote. In the 900 or so years since the early Crusades, both Christianity and Islam have undergone profound changes. The Protestant Reformation shook Christianity to its core, and the Renaissance in Europe wrought huge transformations in both Christianity and Judaism. Perhaps the most critical change came about in the 18th century when Jefferson, Madison, Franklin, and others synthesized the highest ideals of Greek, Roman, and Iroquois thought and culture to create the United States of America. In doing that, they ignited the flame of liberty, bringing into the world an archetype that to this day inspires hope worldwide. As America grew and our ideas of Republican democracy spread around the world, further transformations of the world took place. Another turning point was when modern science challenged the medieval worldview of the church in the Scopes monkey trial of 1925. Although Clarence Darrow lost that case, its widespread publicity began a dramatic and lasting process of change across the world. The American dream is a powerful and pervasive force in the world, even if the sometimes imperialistic behavior of our transnational corporations is often at odds with our own ideals. That dream has wafted over the entire world and is still so powerful that people are willing to die for it. In China, the Tiananmen Square protesters marched to their doom in 1989, carrying a 37-foot-tall papier-mâché replica of the Statue of Liberty, which they had renamed the Goddess of Democracy. Of course, there are still pockets of medieval perspective in the Christian world. The post-disaster comments of Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson, who said they had just witnessed the wrath of their God, who had lifted the veil and allowed the terrorists to act because of their God's anger over homosexuals, liberals, and the ACLU, reveals that such a worldview is still alive and well in a small fringe of Christianity. Some Christians are still today willing to commit terrorist acts of murder or mass murder. Timothy McVeigh and those who murdered numerous abortion providers all claimed their acts are grounded in Christianity and biblical teachings. And just as 21st century Christianity still has its own pockets of medieval worldview, so does 21st century Islam. And then it gets into, how these reformations happen and, what we hope to see in among those right-wing crazies in Islam. The book is From the Ashes, a spiritual response to the attack on America. Hey, want to hear that clip again? Subscribe to the Thom Hartmann Program on YouTube to see all your favorite show highlights.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom. Today, on Martin Luther King Day, we're talking about a lot of things, but it kind of is just, I think, can be summed up by recognizing the totality of our country, the good and the bad, and how the good only advances through struggle. Resistance, opposition, and struggle. And Trump and his agenda has already been, we already saw yesterday, we saw 70 events with elected members of Congress all across the country. Trump's not even president yet. And they're saying no, they're rejecting his agenda. 500 grassroots satellite events, hundreds of thousands of people all across the country, in every state in the union, saying no to Trump, Mitch McConnell, Paul Ryan, saying no. I'm really excited to be joined now on the phone with another resistance to the Trump agenda that I'm sure everyone has heard of, because it seems that it is history making in that the women marching on Washington, D.C. have the potential. I mean, we'll see what happens, but from everything I'm reading, it looks like there's going to be more people coming to D.C. to protest President Trump than there are going to be people coming to inaugurate President Donald. And joining me now on the phone is Nucci Courier, the president of the Women's National Democratic Club, to talk about why people are coming for this very big visual resistance, an act of resistance. And then after the day, how is that going to play out around the country? So, Nucci, thanks so much for joining us here on the Thom Hartmann Program. It's great to talk to you.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for having me on. I'm really honored to be on this show.
So, Nucci, can you tell us a little bit about what's going on Saturday?
So, actually, so I am the president of the Women's National Democratic Club. We are a 94-year-old institution based in Washington, D.C. We have this house that we operate out of at DuPont Circle, and we have become the hub for the march in Washington, D.C. So we are doing 4 days of programming. But before I go there, you mentioned Dr. Martin Luther King. And I just want to quote something he had said, because I think that's so relevant to what we're going to be doing. He said, "We cannot walk alone. And as we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead. We cannot turn back." And I think that is basically what this whole show of force is about. I wouldn't even call it the protest. And now I'm speaking on behalf of the Women's National Democratic Club, not necessarily on behalf of the organizers of the march, because each one of us looks at this phenomenon a little bit differently. I am seeing it as a show of force by women, basically a warning to the new cabinet that is going to be sworn in and is being sworn in as we speak by the president-elect, that all the advances that women have made over almost a century now, you better not dismantle them, because there is going to be active resistance. We are for peace, justice, and equality. This is a social movement. We're about social progress. We're about sustaining the momentum after the march, being proactive about women's rights, because there is so much to lose, and it was so hard to win. We are inspired, and we want to inspire. We are channeling our energies for the next day and the long haul. So we are seeing this as a movement which is an everyday act of resistance. This is something that is really, really, really important to us.
So, Nucci, I think that something that Dr. King spoke of, and the civil rights movement around him spoke of, and his legacy really shines a light on the fundamental power of nonviolent, organized resistance. That the way that the people can oppose power, money power, the power of the state, is through nonviolent, organized resistance. And I think that is so important. I sometimes see things on like social media where people are like, "Oh, well, what is this going to do?" You know, like, "Oh, well, what's the point of these rallies yesterday, hundreds of thousands of people, or the march after the inauguration, the show of force by women?" And I really think I understand why. And I think people need to delve into it. It's because all power, literally all power, emanates from the people. The people hold people accountable.
Yeah, and people need to understand, and I'm going to now go back to the inspiration that Dr. King got from Gandhi. Gandhi's nonviolent movement in India, it was a long struggle, but it ended in the end of the rule of the British in India and of self-determination of Indians after 200 years. The civil rights movement in this country also, it took a long time to come to fruition, but we then did achieve what we had sought to achieve. And now this administration seems to be threatening a lot of the tenets that this country is based upon, in terms of equal rights, just in terms of the dignity of man. And so we, like I said, it isn't so much a protest as a promise that we are not going to be silent, that we are going to be a force, and we are going to do everything in our power to make sure that none of our rights are going to be trampled upon easily.
I think that's so important. I love the way you said it, that I don't think of it as a protest. I think of it as a promise. I think that's super powerful. That is fundamentally what is under when we have actions, when we stand up. It is a promise that we will use our power, which is the only power that exists, people power.
Right.
And our elected officials, they work for us.
That's right.
And it's a
they
promise.
Forget that.
It's a promise that they will go against our will at their own peril. If they cross women, all their promises, if they break their promises or they go through with some of their promises, some of them were honest about what they wanted to do. But, you know, these are deeply unpopular things. And the promise is if they go against the will of the people, they will be fired. They will be headed home. They will have their power removed from them by the people who actually are the only people, the only place where there is power is in the people.
And this is also not just about women. It is women who are basically coming out on the street making a certain point. And the point is not just women's rights, which are human rights. It is also about everything that is being attacked. Our diversity is being attacked of this nation, immigration, healthcare, the environment, all these public policy issues which we feel really strongly about, they all seem to be under attack. And so our agenda is vast, and we are not going to be silent. And we are actually planning all kinds of different platforms. One of them is an educational platform. Now I'm talking about my own institution, the Women's National Democratic Club. We are very concerned that civics is not even being taught in schools anymore, which means people don't know their own constitution. They don't know the Bill of Rights. There is so much ignorance about how our government should be operating. And so I think we have a really long way to go in trying to address all the issues that this nation is faced with. And then when it comes to women, women are so underrepresented, not just in government, also in business. 20% of the Senate and 19% of the House of Representatives is women. That's it. We have over 50% of the U.S. population. Women of color constitute only 6.2% of the total 535 members of Congress. There's only one woman of color in the Senate. These are all issues that really concern and bother us, and we really need to do something about it. And we are going to speak with one voice. The group that is organizing this march is a very diverse group. And diversity is the strength of this country. I think it's the strength of this world. And we can't forget that.
Nucci, I'm so happy to hear you lay out the powerful agenda that this march is the starting point of, and the fight that will continue back in every state in the nation. I know that I have friends coming into town for the march who are not what, you know, they themselves say, I'm not, quote unquote, political, whatever that means, right?
Right. Everyone is political.
Exactly. But now people are recognizing that that's not a choice that you can make. You can't make the choice to somehow remove the polity, your duty to this nation from your everyday life. And I think people are recognizing that. I have friends who are coming into D.C. who have never done anything like this before, and I think in standing in solidarity with, you know, all the other people who come into town for this, they will see, they will feel, they will understand the true power that the people have. And it's going to be incredibly powerful. But I want to make sure that anyone who's listening who wants more information can get that. Nucci, can you direct people somewhere where they can find more information about all of what we've talked about?
So about these next 4 days, starting on the 18th and ending on the 21st, we have 4 days of heavy programming. it's all on our webpage, which is www.womensmarchevents.com. womensmarchevents.com. We have all day, 9 to 5, we have an open house at our clubhouse where people are gathering for advocacy training. They are there to make flags and banners and sashes, preparing for the march itself. We are encouraging out-of-towners to come and be with us and congregate and discuss and talk and plot and plan. And then every evening we have a fabulous group of speakers. We have a congressional reception on the 18th. We have something which relates to the nexus of art and politics the following day. We have it's a super charged agenda. It is a fabulous space to be. We have the Reverend Jesse Jackson who's coming. He's going to be the keynote speaker on one of the days. He is also going to be coming to our breakfast. We're serving breakfast on the day of the march. And our address is 1526 New Hampshire Avenue Northwest. So we are right at DuPont Circle. And then we're now looking into providing transportation. And we're also on the metro right there.
Great.
So
Nucci, in the final 30 seconds here, give us the URL again. And
yep, it's womensmarchevents.com.
womensmarchevents.com. Nucci, thank you so much for all that you're doing to make this bold act of resistance and opposition visible and powerfully right there the day after the inauguration. Thank you so much. You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson. We will be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
We'll be taking more of your calls right after this on the Thom Hartmann Program. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom. And I want to go to the phones, but my computer... Oh, there it is. It was user error. It was me. I was going to blame it on the computer, but it was me. Here we go. Chuck in North Carolina. Chuck, you're on the line.
Hey, Alex. I came into the middle of your discussion about Martin Luther King Jr., and I wanted to find out if you had mentioned William F. Pepper, who has written a number of books about the assassination of King. Did you mention?
I did not. I did not.
Okay, well, I wanted to call in today to let everybody know that they can find out more about William Francis Pepper and his books, which are, roughly speaking, let's see, what is it here? Orders to Kill, Plot to Kill King, An Active State, etc. They're readily available, and I would, I'd encourage everybody to look into those things.
I certainly will. I'll give us a little synopsis, because it sounds like what they're about is how it's not like things have changed and enormous, but they have changed a lot. But white supremacy and the white supremacist power structure oftentimes included massive parts of the state, of law enforcement. J. Edgar Hoover, for example, and his FBI fought viciously against anything that seemed to be aimed at advancing civil rights. And that's all true. Wiretapping Martin Luther King Jr. was just one of the things that the power structure in this country did to hold white supremacy up. I mean, I think people know, and now it's readily available. You can learn about COINTELPRO and other programs of disruption. You can learn about Fred Hampton being shot to death in his bed. All sorts of efforts at marginalizing or neutralizing the civil rights movement.
Right. Well, and that's what I'd encourage folks to do, because there's a lot out there, and I'm fascinated by this. And William F. Pepper, let's put it this way, he digs it because he's a lawyer, and he spent extensive time on it. I don't dig, I just dust with the help of reading things like Smedley Butler's War as a Racket, or understanding about Lieutenant Colonel Robert Bowman, who was the first creator. He was the creator of the so-called the Defense Initiative, from the Ford administration, which was not a defense initiative. It was an offense initiative of missile control.
So Chuck, thanks so much for calling in about so many issues. And today on Martin Luther King Day, I do think it's really important that people take it upon themselves to learn about the full legacy of both Martin Luther King Jr. and of the United States of America. You have to understand the good and the bad of this country so that we can advance in the direction of the good. You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program, and we will be right back. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom. I only got about 2 minutes in this segment, so I'm going to take all calls on the other side of this break. On the way out the show. So I want people to, what are the acts of resistance that you're undertaking? Like, if you're angry about what Trump is saying, the direction he's going to take this country, about the direction that Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell are going to take this country, what are the acts that you're taking? Because I want to encourage everyone, the most radical act is to understand that you're not in the struggle alone. The most radical act that you can take is to find a friend, ally, neighbor, and stand with that person and raise your voices together. The global oligarchy, the Wall Street, the greedy liars on Wall Street, their minions in the pharmaceutical industry who works for Wall Street, insurance industry who works for Wall Street, they only can have power by splitting us up, by dicing us up into little different groups. Well, you're this type of person, so you can't talk to this type of person. And, oh, you care about this and not that. So then we're all kind of separated. And, you know, when there's only one of us standing alone, it's not, it's overwhelming. But that radical act of solidarity. So I was so happy to talk to Nucci earlier about the Women's March. And when you have millions of people standing together, our voices cannot be ignored. So find people in your area who are doing who focus on the issue that you want to work on, and join them. Join them in the struggle. You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom, and we will be right back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We're taking more of your calls right after this on the Thom Hartmann Program.
Let me start out. The big question here, okay? The big question is, why is it that our poor neighborhoods remain poor? Whether it's in inner city Baltimore or whether it's in Appalachia, why is it that our poor neighborhoods remain poor? And I would argue that there is a cycle to this that has three major components. The first is that the schools suck in poor neighborhoods. There's no mystery or surprise to anybody. Schools tend not to do as well in poor neighborhoods. And part of that has been rationalized by people saying, well, you know, that's because poor people are going to those schools and their children start out life with, you know, a smaller vocabulary, and you know, those neighborhoods tend to be more polluted, and, you know, lead poisoning, God only knows. But anyhow, there's that argument. And I'm going to tell you why I think that those are all secondary arguments. The second is that policing tends to be different in poor communities and communities of color, and frankly worse. It's not as high quality as the policing in wealthy white neighborhoods, or even in you know, suburban upper middle class neighborhoods. And the third is that we you know, we're really starting to learn this clearly now, is that people of color literally have to stand in line twice as long as white people to vote every 2 years. Why is that? So here's the Trump riff that got me started thinking about this. Here he is. Here's Donald Trump.
I say it again. What do you have to lose? Look, what do you have to lose? You're living in poverty. Your schools are no good. You have no jobs. 58% of your youth is unemployed. What the hell do you have to lose?
So, you know, first of all, Trump, to a large extent, is just perpetuating white stereotypes of black communities, you know. And in fact, it's quite insulting. And the what do you have to lose is really easily answered by simply going through all the things that the Republicans are trying to undo. They've successfully, in fact, gutted the Voting Rights Act, you know, the Civil Rights Act. They want to go after, you know, frankly, everything all the way back to Brown v. Board. So there's a lot to lose. But setting that aside, because that argument has been well made both on this program and in other places, what I think is going on here is that this is a piece of the new Jim Crow, to paraphrase Michelle Alexander, that has to do, and I think the conservatives have been doing this really slick for a long time. And I think it all has to do with, it's the money, stupid. People stand in line in poor communities twice as long to vote as they do in rich communities. Why? Because voting systems are paid for at the county level. So there's a smaller budget to run good voting operations. You have fewer voting machines, or you have fewer ballot places, or you have fewer locations, you have fewer poll workers, so the lines get longer. So, you know, because they depend on the local property tax and the local income tax in those communities that have it. So that's voting. Schools are paid, you know, I went off on a rant about this yesterday. Schools are paid by property taxes. Therefore, poor neighborhoods have bad schools. Good neighborhoods have great schools. It's real simple. It's got nothing to do with charter schools or school choice or any of that kind of BS. This is just flack that's being thrown into the wind by, in some cases, well-meaning liberals. More often, I'd say, conservatives who want to have private for-profit charter schools replace public education. But anyhow, the schools are funded locally. And then third, our police departments. Why do they have bad hiring standards? Why do they hire you know, in communities of color in particular, why do you tend to get police officers who are the bottom of the barrel, basically? They're not necessarily the best paid. They're certainly not the best trained. You know, why? Well, because they're funded locally. So where did this come from? These three things are the quality of the future of the neighborhood, which is the schools, the quality of life of the present of the neighborhood, which is the police, and the ability of the neighborhood to have a say in its own governance, which is voting. How is it that all three of these things suck in poor communities? And by the way, in poor white communities as well as black communities, although it seems to be worse in some African-American communities. Why is it that they suck? You know, even in the face of efforts to change things, I would say it's because they're all funded locally. And conservatives have been promoting this idea of local control. And I would suggest to you that local control is a euphemism for local funding. The last thing people in white wealthy suburbs want to do is have their property tax dollars or their income tax dollars go to pay for schools in poor black neighborhoods. They don't want to pay for the police in the poor black neighborhoods, and they don't want to pay for the voting stations in poor black neighborhoods or just poor neighborhoods. And so these neighborhoods then find themselves locked into this cycle of poverty because they don't have the resources to pull themselves out. Hey, want to hear that clip again? Subscribe to the Thom Hartmann Program on YouTube to see all your favorite show highlights.
Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom, and we're going to go all the way to the end of the show, just taking your calls. So let's do this. Let's start with Martha in North Carolina.
Hi. Oh, thank you for taking my call. And happy Dr. Martin Luther King Day. I've marched with Dr. King and John Lewis in 1963 in D.C. on the March for Jobs and Freedom. And also in 1965, I was in the last 5 miles of the Selma March. Can you hear me?
I can. Thank you for all of your effort.
Oh, well, okay. I did some other things, too, but I'm an octogenarian now. But I am going to go to a couple of things tomorrow. Anyway, I wanted to call. I'm a student of sociology, and I wanted to call to say, when Tom was talking about, ways of thinking, and I use the term worldview to kind of cover ways of thinking, values, attitudes, and I think we should adopt the UN Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which we passed in 1948, and we should adopt that as a part of our founding papers, because it fits right in with the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, and healthcare is a universal human right. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, it should be a way of adding that. Anyway, that's a worldview that I think a lot of Americans do support, and we need every American to support health care as a universal right, which, we do with Medicare. For people over 65, we do that.
Right. And what we need to do is expand that to everybody. Which, that was the original, that was always the original, I know. That was the idea.
Yes.
In 1935, when Social Security was created, you can read all about it. It's what I do. I'm the executive director of Social Security work, so I spend a lot of time looking at this. And it was always supposed to be, FDR called it the cornerstone that this was going to be built on, and the 4 freedoms. But they'd be very proud of us in some respects, and they'd be very disappointed in us in others. And one of the ones where we have failed miserably is healthcare. That not only do we not have national healthcare for every American as a right, but the healthcare that we do have that works, the part of our health system that works, which is Medicare, the part of our health system that works, that is granted to people as a right when they reach a certain age or if they have a disability, then that right now they're trying to take it away from people. So, we definitely need to change our worldview. And what I want to say is we have to understand and get back to a worldview that is our worldview, that this new sort of nihilistic, everybody is on their own, there is no community, embracing chaos over community is absolutely brand new. Brand new in the long history of things. Since the 80s, this is the Reagan Thatcher. These are just massively different than the way things have always been. The idea that that you don't work together to solve your problems, that selfishness should be rewarded. That is a worldview that is brand new and totally wrong. So, Martha, I'm completely with you on changing our worldview, but it's more getting back to understanding these values that are woven into what it is to be an American.
it's the woven in part also that we need to teach, because this is institutionalized. That's the way it works. Institutions are part of society that set up, they're set up to get things done, like economic institutions provide jobs, so forth. And we have some people think, if they live in California, that the problem of racism and discrimination is not theirs. But white supremacy has been institutionalized in many ways across the nation. And so California or Alabama, all of us have to figure out, when we recognize it, discover it, and get it out of our institutions. And that's the other thing, I think, that adopt the FDR worldview. That is our worldview. It's just been trampled on, as you say.
And I think Martha, something that you said that's important to recognize, and it's why we have, as Americans, kind of broadly, we have a really hard time understanding the totality of our history. We like to pretend lots of things, and we just like to ignore a lot of things. And it's a very childish way of perceiving our country, because our country is very strong and very amazing and wonderful. But man, does it have some problems that we have to be able to see in order to address, and just ignoring them does nothing. And if you understand, as you're saying, and this is so important, that white supremacy, for example, it's not like an accident. It's not like, oh, well, everyone makes a choice and then, it's a moral failing. Our country was founded on things like white supremacy. So it's not like the laws as a side of them were put in place to defend this. The laws were written. We inherited this stuff. We didn't choose that we'd have institutions that were based on white supremacy. We inherited that. But if we're so embarrassed or just we want to believe that, like, oh, well, those problems in the past are gone, we can't see the issues. And if you can't see the issues, if you can't see what we've inherited, then you can't actually build a better future. And that is, it's so important right now, when it seems like there's this reactionary groundswell, this massive global reactionary groundswell that's truly frightening, a nationalist, populist, I'm reactionary groundswell all around the world. And I think if we start being honest with each other, then we can actually see the problems, work together to fix them, and have a brighter future.
Yeah, and I think we've had movements that have put us forward, and like the civil rights movement, and then we got kicked backwards with Supreme Court decisions and local state laws that want to disenfranchise people, and that's
Martha, thank you so much for your call. I'm just really happy to speak with you today and hear about you taking part side by side in these struggles, and still in the struggle today, and understanding and being able to teach somebody like me how the struggle continues, and it just will continue, and we can't check out. We need to step forward now and continue this struggle. So you're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
We're taking more of your calls right after this on the Thom Hartmann Program. And we're back on the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm just looking down to try to take the caller who's been on the line the longest. So Howard, thank you. I'm sorry, Pete from Texas. Thank you for holding. Pete, you're on the air.
Yeah, Alex, I wonder if you caught Donnie Boy's press conference the other day. I just about fell off my chair
Despicable.
when he told that CNN reporter 3 different times. He told him, "Don't be rude."
Despicable. Yeah, it was a disgrace. It was a disgrace. Right now, I have no respect for Donald, none. And so, there's people who are like, oh, well, respect the office, which I appreciate that sentiment, but I'll start respecting the office when Donald respects the office. And he's clearly not. I mean, it's just that press conference was, when it wasn't just despicable, it was actually downright scary how un-American the whole thing felt. Felt right out of Putin's Russia.
Well, I agree with you. There was well, that's about it. Thank you.
I mean, Pete, he packed the room with his own staff to boo, to jeer, and to cheer. That's not a press conference. This country there's a relationship of people in power to the press, to the fourth estate, and the fourth estate is supposed to hold people in power accountable. The press doesn't answer to power. And it's so dangerous that Donald Trump doesn't seem to understand that. So, Pete, thank you for your call. I really hope that I don't even think CNN's that great. They're corporate media. They were they spent 30 minutes giving Trump's empty podium airtime during the primary. I bet you they feel stupid about that now, or kind of wish they hadn't have. The corporate media in general they created Donald Trump. They created the myth that is Donald Trump because he knows how to play them like a fiddle. But now he's going to be president in 4 days. And so now, you would think the man would understand that he has entered, his life is now part of the story of the United States of America, our great story. He is now not a sideshow, footnote, reality TV star, or reality TV, whatever you are when you're, big in reality TV. He is part of the story of America. And he just doesn't understand how to act like that. Like his refusal to stop mixing his personal gain with his public office, the just absolute corruption that from the moment he takes power after his oath, he will be in contravention of the Constitution of the United States of America, because he refuses to understand that the story that is America, that is all of us, is much greater than the story that is Donald. I think we're going to have to raise our voices and remind him of that. You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. I'm Alex Lawson, filling in for Tom. We're going to take more of your calls right after this. Welcome back to the Thom Hartmann Program. What a wonderful way to spend my Monday on this Martin Luther King Day with you all, talking with you all on the Thom Hartmann Program. Go right to the line here. Horace in North Carolina, you're on the air.
How you doing, sir?
Good. How are you?
Okay. One of Donald Trump's sons opened a business in South Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
Shortly thereafter, he filed for bankruptcy.
AKA the Trump way.
Excuse me?
I'm sorry, I was just making a joke saying, AKA the Trump way to file for bankruptcy.
Okay. Donald Trump came in, paid $3 million to take it out of bankruptcy. The state of South Carolina told him, they went and inspected the building, that they were going to have to clean it out. Now, they have all of this toxic chemicals within the building. and eventually this stuff is going to leak out of these barrels or whatever. Now, Donald Trump says that he was not in charge of that. He only purchased the business and he had nothing to do with that. Now, the people in South Carolina are going to have to go to the EPA and the news media to get these things out because nobody is doing nothing, and eventually it's going to at least harm the people that reside there.
So, Horace, it sounds like this is I don't know anything about this story, but it sounds like it's a like a super fund site issue where a company creates enough of an environmental hazard that they can't actually themselves afford to clean it up. So then it falls to the taxpayers to do so. And the only difference here is that the person who's going to be president in 4 days is in the middle of it. Horace, thank you so much for your call. I'm going to go to Judy from South Carolina. Judy, you're on the air.
Hello.
Hi, you're on the air.
Hi, I am furious. As the days pass by, I get more and more furious. I cannot understand how brilliant people in America could go along with Donald Trump, Paul Ryan, and the rest of them trying to steal our Social Security. We paid into the fund, some of us twice, because I worked 2 jobs most of my life. We paid FICA. We paid COLA. So how can they get the nerve to steal our money?
Judy,
I'd just like to know that.
you are speaking my language. I also would like to know, but I can kind of give you my guess at how it goes down, because it usually goes down like this. First, the media are absolutely horrible. So the corporate media are a bunch of liars. They don't know how to actually report facts, especially when it comes to Social Security, because they answer to the greedy liars on Wall Street who want to loot and steal our money. The hedge funds and the greedy liars on Wall Street are hedge fund people. They only have one maneuver. They go into a company and they reach their hands into the workers' pockets and they steal their money, usually through a pension. So now they look at the biggest pool, the public pension, Social Security, and they want to do the same thing. The American people are inundated with all this information all the time. The news media, so-called news media, the corporate media, don't tell the truth about what's going on. And people are really busy. They're working, they're taking care of their family. And I think, unfortunately, there is just this thing, and it's really like unfortunate, but it's kind of wonderful in another way, which is I don't think that many Americans actually believe that people can be so bad that they'd steal their Social Security. You know what I mean? Like, they're like, no, I don't think that's really what they're trying to do. I think they're probably just trying to help people. And you're like, no, they're literally coming to steal your money. But people always want to give them the benefit of the doubt, which is why, Judy, it's so important that you continue to do what you're doing, which is raising your voice and letting people know. You tell your friends, your family, your neighbors, you write letters to the editor, you call your senators as many times as possible. We're talking about Social Security, but you know Medicare is just as important, Judy, and you know they're coming for Medicare first. So call your senators, Graham and Scott, right? And call them and demand that they pledge they will vote no on any reconciliation bill that includes Medicare. And if they don't, make your pledge. You've pledged to vote them out of office. That's how we have to approach this. We have to get the word out that they're coming to destroy Social Security. They're coming to destroy Medicare. And then we have to fight back by raising our voices together. Judy, I'm going to try to get to one more call. So thank you for your call and for everything that you do. Jamie in Washington State. Jamie, you're on the line.
Hi, Alex. How are you doing today?
Good.
I just had a question for you, and then I'll get off the air and you can answer it. Are they going to come after the VA too?
Yes. Yes, they are. I want to give you a little trick that you can use, Jamie, to kind of guess whether the Republicans are going to do something or not. You ask yourself, is this policy cruel and stupid? And if it's both of those, if it's both cruel and stupid, odds are the Republicans are going to get after that. So in the case of the VA, this is a long-held dream, right? So the VA works. The VA works. There are problems with the VA, and we need to address those problems. But those are all problems of the VA not doing enough generally for funding reasons, because the arsonists on Capitol Hill won't give enough funding for the programs that work because they have a strategy. It's 1,000 death by 1,000 cuts. So they go and they starve the VA or Social Security or the post office. They starve it of funding to deliver the world-class service, which people who rely on the VA deserve and have earned, and to turn the people against the VA so then they can privatize it, which is always the end goal, which is just a looting of the public good. So they're definitely coming after the VA. I don't know if you listened before in the show. There's a variance between what Donald Trump is saying, which is just like fantasy land, whatever flits into his mind, he puts out on Twitter, and then what's going on Capitol Hill. And if you want to see what's coming, you look at what's going on Capitol Hill. And on Capitol Hill, they're coming after the VA. They're coming after it with as sharp knives as they're coming after Medicare, as they're coming after Medicaid, as they're coming after Social Security. So, Jamie, you know, we really gotta fight back. Nobody, and the VA is a great one. Like, get in touch with, you know, I always say the most radical act that you can perform is solidarity. It's standing with your neighbor and ally, your friends and family, and raising your voices together. And what's great is actually standing with people that you don't know, with a stranger in solidarity, because you both believe so passionately in something. And, you know, something like the VA is one where I really think we can find some powerful partners. We, at Social Security Works, we stood with the VFW against the cuts called the chain CPI, which would have hit both Social Security recipients and folks in the VA and getting veterans benefits. It would have hit them twice. And together, that was a very powerful combination. Senator Sanders was instrumental in leading that. And we're going to need to do that again. It's been wonderful time speaking with all of you here on the Thom Hartmann Program on today, Martin Luther King Day. And, you know, the resistance is now. We have to all work together, raise our voices, fight back. And it started, and we need to just keep the pressure up. So find your allies and raise your voices with them. Thank you. This is the Thom Hartmann Program, and I'm Alex Lawson. And thanks for listening.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann.
Wines have some of the highest pesticide levels in our food chain. This hour brought to you by EcoWine.com. Pesticide-free wines, organic wines, imported from France by the Organic Wine Company, EcoWine.com.
The Thom Hartmann Program is brought to you in part by Super Beets. Super Beets are sourced from non-GMO beets, and they're packed with dietary nitrates, helping to produce nitric oxide for more energy, stamina, and support for healthy blood pressure levels naturally. For more information, call 800-223-8242 or visit freespeechbeets.com.